right. It is April 14th, 2026. This is a special meeting. City Council of Louisville, Colorado. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Fahey.
Here.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Here.
Councilmember Hefner.
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Kurt.
Just made it. Here.
Mayor Lay.
I thought that was on. All right. The long range plan and trails update is our first item. Get my notes up here. This is on for discussion direction. And I can go a little bit. The only thing I wanted to say about that is we're here for high level discussion, not line edits of the document. And we can get to more specific issues as we come in. So staff,
Excellent.
take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Adam Blackmore, Director of Parks, Rec, and Open Space. Appreciate some time this evening. Tonight's check-in or special meeting discussion and direction is intended to provide Council with a recap. We met with you in January, went through kind of what we would call phase one of our engagement, outlined what phase two of our next round of engagement was going to look like, what we were hoping to accomplish in these 4 months that have gone by pretty quickly. So we're going to give you kind of a debrief and a recap of what that phase has looked like and kind of where we are. There's a focus on what we're calling our goals and our strategies, and at the highest level, a guiding principle for this 10 plus year plan that we're working on with our long range plan. We'll also be introducing you back to the inaugural Trails System Plan. That is what we're terming it. In the charter, it is termed the Trails Master Plan. We've moved away from that language and calling it the Trails System Plan. So both of those items will be covered by staff. I'm here with our project manager, Brian Weber, and our marketing and communications specialist, Ginger Cross, as well as our lead consultant from DTJ Design, Keith Wolzak. And so that's the goal tonight, is to get through those principles, the goals and the strategies. You'll hear the feedback that we've received from every advisory board through multiple meetings with those groups, as well as a recap of our second open house that some of you attended, and I appreciated you being there. And then lastly, we'll talk about kind of next steps and kind of what you would like to see accomplished before. Our intention is to bring a draft plan back before you in June, and then a potential final adoption for both of the plans late July. So that's our timeline we're looking at the moment. So without further ado, I'll turn it over for our presentation. It's kind of going to be a discussion and presentation format tonight that Keith will be leading everybody through, and we're here to answer questions as well. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your time tonight. I know you all are very, very busy, and I really do appreciate this time. This is really, as Adam pointed out, this is really timely for us to get together. We've had a lot of movement since January, but we're right in the midst of drafting these two plans. And so the reason why this is so important is that we want to make sure that we're heading in the right direction from your point of view as policymakers. And then we're not forgetting about anything. and staying on track. So this is really super important. And it's not really a presentation. It's really it's truly a work session to be able to talk about the guiding principles, the draft guiding principles, the goals for each division, and the strategies. So we're not here to necessarily get into wordsmithing, but we definitely want to make sure that we're on track when it comes to each one of those components within the study process. So what I'd like to do first is just give you a very, very brief project update, touch on some of the additional community engagement findings that we've experienced in the last couple, 3 months since we last saw you, and then quickly dive into the goals and strategies going forward. I want to encourage you to certainly engage in the conversation, right? We don't expect me to kind of go through a whole series of slides and then interrupt, talk about these things, tell us what's on your mind. We want to record this and we want to make sure that we're staying on track. So thank you again for your time. So from a project update standpoint, you can see down on the bottom, this is where we are. We are truly in the draft plan stage. We are writing the 2 plans currently. And right above the diamond, the pink diamond, if you're square, if you see, there are 4 diamonds above right next to plan adoption process. I want to point that out because that's our second series of advisory board meetings that we've had in the last month and a half. And this is important because each one of the advisory boards that we've met with has done exactly what you're doing here tonight. They're giving us specific guidance on the guiding principles, the strategies, and the goals. It's been really effective going through this process to touch base with each one of these advisory boards during this particular process. So I think the biggest thing I would say about that is that all of the boards are highly engaged. They're giving some great feedback. There's a lot of consistency in terms of what we're hearing. Brian, do we have that handout?
And print some copies of that.
Oh, sorry. I will get this to you, but basically we put together a simple little matrix table that shows the 4 advisory board meetings and the key topics on top. And what we're really trying to highlight with this matrix table is what is the messaging that we're hearing? What's the consistent messaging? Where are some of the outlying thoughts from each of the boards? So it's been really effective.
Yeah, just real quick, it was in the packet addendum that was sent out this afternoon. So
Yes,
if
thank
you
you
haven't
very
had a
much.
chance to see it yet.
So we just put that together just literally yesterday, today and this morning to refine it. But basically, if you kind of take a look at that, again, as I say, it's really trying to help us understand what are the individual boards saying, where are the consistent messages as we've been talking to each of the boards. So thanks for putting that in the packet at the last minute. Last thing I'll say is that we still have, I would say, a good solid 3 to 4 weeks of drafting the plans. The last advisory board meeting we had was just last week with the Open Space Advisory Board. We received a notification, a letter from the Open Space Advisory Board highlighting what they were communicating to us last week. And it's, again, super helpful information. And so we're digesting that information as well as we go into the draft plan. All right. On my laptop, I have a different slide presentation, but that's okay. I'll go with it. Just as a reminder, the guidebook. The guidebook is the universal approach to both of these plan documents, the long-range plan, the PROS long-range plan, which is a 10-year document, and the first ever, if I understand, trail system plan for Louisville. It's all falls within the PROS guidebook. 2 distinct plans. You'll be reviewing both of those at the same time. Here's something I really want to focus on, and I know I touched on this in January, but the last item, the action item down the lower corner is important. What we want to do tonight is focus on guiding principles, goals, strategies. The action plans are coming forward in the next few weeks. We're working on those items as we speak with staff, but we're not getting to that level of detail tonight. So the guiding principles are, if I can describe it for you, the guiding principles is the vision for the PROS department. It includes all the divisions, all the functions within the PROS department. It's the universal guiding principles that drives the entire department, right? When you get into goals, now we're talking about specifically into divisions, parks, recreation, open space, golf services, and there's a whole series of goals on trails, even though it's part of the open space currently. Same with the strategies. As you move down from goals to strategies, you're getting into more and more detail, right? Goals are really intentionally meant to be very aspirational, high level. They're not necessarily measurable. And I use the analogy, I steal this from Mark at the golf services. The goal is to win the Super Bowl. The strategies are how to get to win the Super Bowl. You got to hire a coach. You got to have a ball field. You got to have a stadium. You got to have uniforms, all of those things. You're drilling down into that level of strategies. The action items, which we're not going to talk about tonight, are when do you hire that coach? How much are you going to pay that person? Those levels, that level of detail. Okay. So we have a lot to chew on with goals and strategies here this evening. The guiding principles, as I say, is a vision statement. It's a series of statements. I want to give tons of credit to staff, particularly Ginger, for developing this particular acronym, which is the compass, the north arrow, and aligning the north NORTH to these guiding principles. The question was brought up a couple of days ago, last week at Open Spaces, is this sort of standard procedure when we write these plans? You might see vision statements that look different. Your comprehensive plan that you're just now, I think, adopting has a vision statement. It doesn't necessarily have a series of guiding principles like this, but they are generally doing the same thing. They're aspirational. They set the compass and the overall direction. They're not meant to be tactical or strategic per se. They are, if somebody picks this document up for the first time, nurture existing assets, optimize connections between people and places, reinforce commitment to health and wellness. This is a huge component of parks and recreation departments all over the country. Tailor systems for sustainability and resiliency, honor community resources. Now, I will say that after the feedback we got from OSAP last week, a couple of these descriptors that you see are going to be tweaked slightly based on the input that we're getting. And staff is we're going to make sure we update that, but we did not have that information when we put this slide deck together. So Brian, the nurture existing assets, I think the word was community assets.
Feedback. Oh, sorry. There's a couple items of feedback. Two questions. One was, how does the North encompass new assets that might be added? And the description kind of mentions in there new opportunities, but we wanted to make that a little bit more evident. So proposing nurture and evolve community assets. So the evolution piece speaking to potential new opportunities. The other thing that we had heard was about risk management and disaster response, which we saw as falling under the resilience in the T, but tweaking the description. So rather than just saying long-term resilience of natural and built environments, to say something along the lines of strengthening long-term resilience through ongoing preparedness for, and we could list wildfire, flood, other risks, et cetera. So those were the two things. The other thing that we've heard was the idea of policy. So could we highlight potentially in the letter H about honoring resources, that things would be policy aligned. So like he says, kind of some moving pieces here, but those are the three items that we've heard, trying to elevate those and make them a little more apparent, even at this guiding principle level.
So when you see the draft plans, you might see these subtle changes to this particular item, as well as some of the goals and strategies as well. But that's because we're continually vetting and working with the community members and the boards to refine it before it comes to you. Any thoughts on this, what you see here right now? The draft guiding principles.
I was going to make a comment about the N for nurture, that I guess it aligns with the comment, the feedback you're getting from the boards, that it doesn't speak much to what might go on in the future, except for that second half of the descriptor. So I'm glad to hear that you're gonna edit that to try to account for, what we might do in the future.
I appreciate your wanting to go through and taking questions on each of these, but I think rather move through this and then we'll come back to the ones that I think are critical that council has. Because I'm virtually certain that if we go through all of them, you're going to get line edits from all of us. So we don't want that. And I appreciate you wanting to do it this way, but I think we can probably make it through and do what you need.
That sounds good to me. Okay, so let's move forward on community engagement findings. The next couple of slides are really an overview of and you've seen this slide before. What I want to draw your attention to is the last item on the right, the second open house. So since January, that event occurred. As I said earlier, we just wrapped up 10 formal advisory board meetings just last week with OSAB. But the last open house, number 2, some of you all, I know that you attended that. I just wanted to point that out to you. Just, full disclosure, we did not have the same level of attendance at that open house, but I don't think that's relevant in terms of the quality of information that we gathered at that particular meeting. So that's new in terms of the engagement process. With respect to the open house number 2, the key takeaways were, again, it followed the same open house process, 2 sessions, a midday, an evening work session, multiple stations. Each division had a station. We focused on the goals and strategies. We had some 130 different strategies. It probably was, and we did hear from people, it was information overload. It was a lot of information. We tried to make it as simple as possible and simply ask people to kind of digest the information and give us some dot preferences, not to try to overly complicate things, but it was a ton of information, no question about it. And so, as I say, we did get some really great feedback from people throughout the entire process. This is just simply showing the counting up the dots and what were the 5 top goals. No particular order except for numeric. Trails, goal number 1, improve trail connectivity. It received 85 dots. This is not statistically valid. It's just a good, clear measure because we had everything out on the table. The second goal was open space goal, which was enhance the open space system to promote ecological benefits and equitable access, 78 votes. Another open space goal, number 2, advance and maintain foundational inventories, plans, and procedures to support informed land management decisions. The next one was a recreational and senior center goal topic, support lifelong health, wellness, and social connections. And then finally, parks received 59 votes. Goal number 3, advanced sustainability resiliency initiatives. Just looking at that diversity of those 5 those items right there, we're starting to hit on topics that every one of the divisions are touching on. So, for instance, parks on the bottom. While it got 59 goals about sustainability and resilience, the recreation and recreation facility is all about sustainability and resilience. Open space is about sustainability and resilience as well. Just trying to point out where the dots measured up from the open house event. Okay, this is where we're going to get into some questions if you have. I want to focus on what the challenges are on the left. The potential strategies are listed to respond to each of the challenges, and that helped inform where we are today in terms of refining the goals and establishing the strategies. So under parks, what we heard was deferred maintenance. Take care of what we have. The second one is that there's a lack of outdoor sports courts, exercise equipments, and multi-purpose fields. Multi-purpose fields, parks helps and works with recreation division to jointly develop and program active ball fields. Parks designs and plans and builds them, but recreation manages the programs, right? So there's a relationship there. The third one is additional trail connections needed for parks, literally accessing into parks. Safety at crossings and intersections near and adjacent to parks. Vegetation management for visibility and fire mitigation. Those are the things that we kept hearing over the process for parks. I will skip over the potential strategies because we have other items to address. So as a result, these are the 6 goals that were developed for parks. First of all, we need to prioritize and take care of these existing assets and support high quality user experiences and efficient operations. The second goal is target recreational amenities. Recreational amenities on the park side are those active ball fields again, right? That specifically are addressing community needs. The third goal is advance sustainability and resilient initiatives on park maintained properties. The fourth goal is cultivate a diverse, healthy, and adaptable urban forest. There was a lot of discussion about that item being directly related to the goal statement above, which is all about sustainability and resiliency. So it's possible that we could see a reorganization there, but this is where we have landed at this time. Goal number 5 is enhance connections between parks and the surrounding neighborhoods and community. And then also 6, support funding partnerships to sustain division services. You're going to see that goal number 6 repeat on every division. Partnerships funding. It just is a repeating idea that's throughout the entire document. So skipping up to recreational and senior centers, the senior center. The challenges that we have heard over and over is staffing shortages present constraints on the operations and the programs. There's a desire for additional teen and senior programs. One of the advisory boards that we touched base with twice was the Youth Advisory Board. Extremely engaged in the process. They were super helpful. They have entirely different perspectives than other advisory boards. So they were instrumental in helping us understand what their viewpoints are. There's a huge demand on the aquatic center, and we're exceeding capacity for the population that we have today. Field conditions, just generally those athletic ball fields, the courts, we need to constantly maintain and update those the conditions for those facilities. And then finally, insufficient sports courts and multi-purpose fields. Your population is leveling out. You've declined slightly. You're starting to shift towards a more aging, higher age bracket community, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay that way. And so we have to make sure that we're dealing with all of these aspects universally. Just because that we're in one point at this moment in time with the demographic shifting, these things are all coming into play. So the goals are continue to maintain facilities to support safe and consistent user experiences. Goal number 2, support lifelong health, wellness, social connections for all community members. 3, utilize data to make informed and balanced decisions. 4, manage operational capacity to support effective program and facility operations. 5, enhance facility and operational sustainability, resiliency, and efficiencies. 6, plan for the long-term future of aquatic infrastructure and programming. There was discussions about, is the facility enough to handle the growth and the demand in the future? Is there a need for a new facility? 7, support funding and partnerships to sustain diverse services. I'm going to move on to Coal Creek Golf Course. The challenges are here. No surprise, I think. There's been a lot of study in this, that the clubhouse facility is undersized and antiquated. You did just put a lot of money into that facility, and I know the staff over there is ecstatic about that. But it's still undersized in terms of what the potential growth might be for the golf, the holistic view of what the golf division could sustain over time. A limited engagement for non-golf participants. Soil and drainage issues limit turf quality. This is a constant battle for golf courses everywhere. It's always a maintenance issue. The restaurant offerings are lacking. I know there's a new vendor there, and the staff is pretty excited about that, but there's potential to grow that. And then finally, the current operational model limits flexibility and market retail opportunities. This, I believe, is about diversifying the potential for other retail opportunities at that site. event centers, things like that. So the goals are, there's 5 goals. 1, maintain high quality operations and consistently positive consumer experiences. The golf staff are all about the user experience. It's really critically important. It's high to them, but there's also opportunities to expand potential for events and other needs there. And if that's the case over time, the golf staff are good at what they do, but there's going to be the need for other staff to support those other events down the road. So there might be some staffing implications as well. Goal number 2, ensure the long-term financial sustainability of the golf facilities. Again, leading on to that, what are the other potentials, event centers, other ancillary opportunities to bring in additional revenues? 3, invest in the facility and infrastructure improvements to support the course's long-term vision. 4, continue to deliver engaging programming that strengthens the Coal Creek community. And what staff means by the Coal Creek community is not just the golfing community, but the potential other community members that can use that facility over time. And 5, support funding partnerships to sustain division services. The golf facility is a enterprise district, zone district. It functions differently, and staff brought up quite a few times that their operational needs from a retail perspective are different than other retail operations within the city. It just operates in a slightly different way. The enterprise function works pretty well, but maybe procurement doesn't really quite understand that system entirely. And so that was brought up. Shifting to open space. The challenges are, there are diverse perspectives on land management, how we operate and protect land management. I think this is worth drilling in a little bit. There are folks, advocates, who believe that the open space needs to be about protect natural resources, conserve open spaces. There are other people in the community that feel like open space is also a recreational opportunity. And so we're constantly working to make sure that we're striving to recognize both of those perspectives, and I would say balance them based on what the community's needs are going forward. So when we say diverse perspectives, really that's what it's about. You have the infrastructure in place with Article 15 and the land classification system. That is being updated. The data is being updated. So we now have new data to understand that land classification system better. But there are really 2 parts to that land classification system: protect and preserve, but then also visitor experiences from a recreational standpoint. So the land classification system, Article 15, acknowledges both of those. The plan needs to acknowledge both of those as well. The other challenge is that there's a need for additional mapping and inventories needed. Staff just completed a vegetation survey, and we've modified the mapping to reflect that vegetation data, which is a really solid move forward. But it never stops, right? Next few years, there's going to have to be more additional analysis, right? Limit policies for undesignated social, limited policies. You literally don't have a policy on social trails. And we're trying to stress in the plan, you need to develop a policy, and it needs to be informed by the data. And the policy then needs to establish criteria on how to manage those social trails, whether they're on recreational open space lands or they're cutting through a park. We need to help you establish a policy. The other challenge is opportunities to increase educational awareness. You can never have enough educational awareness. You need to use technology to the best of your advantage. You need to use social media. You need to use print. The whole library of opportunities needs to be applied. And then finally, need for permanent dedicated funding sources. You do have funding sources that are assigned to open space. With the new trails plan, we're going to suggest that you identify trails fundings as well, so you can move that plan forward. There are 5 goals. Goal number 1, prioritize open space natural resource management to support environmental stewardship, resource protection, and sustainability practices. Number 2, advance and maintain foundational inventories, inventory data, science-based data, plans and procedures to support informed land management decisions. 3, promote environmental stewardship through outreach and education. 4, enhance the open space system to promote ecological benefits and equitable access. And then 5, support funding and partnerships to sustain division services. Again, I want to remind everybody that we are fine tuning this language. So we're not making radical changes to this, but we're trying to make clear what we mean by certain things. So the word foundational inventories caught our attention. What do we mean by that? We're trying to clean those kinds of things up. And then moving into trails, there's been a lot of community support and engagement in the process on the trails component. And there's been a lot of robust discussions about recreational trails on open space lands, shared use path systems within the city, which are basically managed by Public Works for the most part. And there are portions where there's an interface that happens between those two things. I'll give you a good example. A shared use path, a paved path that crosses a road that's adjacent to a park. Currently, Parks is maintaining that shared use path and the park system. We think there's a little opportunity there to clean up that sort of operational piece. But the conversations over the last few months have helped us to understand that dynamic. So some of the challenges here are, by far and away, connect the system. Whether it's recreational path systems, soft surface trails, or the hard surface multi-use system, connect the system. The second one is safety, improve safety conditions. Deal with these crossings and underpasses where everybody is using them to get to parks or open spaces or recreational facilities. This is where the interface happens between parks, pros department, and Public Works. A lot of discussion about e-bike safety rules and regulations, etiquette, and enforcement. This is an area where I don't know that there's many communities across the United States that have figured it out. It's changing all the time. You have motorized bikes that simply don't meet the law. And you and other cities don't have a law that addresses that issue. But there's also enforcement and regulations and education as well. Trails, natural resources impacts from undesignated social trails or recreational trails. And I want to point out that these are not in any particular order. They're all challenges. And finally, there's a lack of trail standards. There are 6 goals, draft goals at this moment in time. Is it okay to keep moving forward? Okay. Number 1, improve trail connectivity to better link neighborhoods, local destinations, and the regional trail system beyond the city of Louisville. 2, establish clear and consistent written standards. We've substituted the word written with design standards because that's what we're talking about here for trail and trail maintenance protocols. 3, enhance safety for all users across the trail system, including the shared path system. 4, protect natural resources and science-based data-informed, information. So this was brought up by OSAB, rightfully so. The word thoughtful seems a little subjective, and so we're deleting the word thoughtful and being more specific here. 5, adopt a decision-making framework for undesignated trails. We're recommending to say literally what we mean, adopt a social trails policy. And then finally, support funding and partnerships to sustain the system. Okay. This is what we want to do, is try to get your feedback on not necessarily the wordsmithing, because we're working on that. We're going to bring the plan to you and you'll have lots of opportunities to do that. But the big questions are there elements that you know that are missing from what we just reviewed? And I'm happy to go back to slides. Are there missing elements? Are there elements that are just simply confusing that you want to tell us to fix? We don't need to solve it here today, but are there things that we just need to clarify and be a little more but just clear about it? So I would love to hear from you all at this point.
Yeah, let me try to put a little bit more structure around that. Often the way we do this is to go sort of by working by exception. And I think you set this up very nicely. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. You've provided guiding principles. We can go back. I may have you just work through these. And we can talk just to make sure everybody is comfortable with the guiding principle. Appreciate having a nice acronym there. Are folks comfortable with those? Okay, thoughts? I see some questions or comments. Yes.
No, I mean, I think it's great. It's catchy. It's like North Star. I think there's a lot about it that's wonderful. I think at the same time, it's nurture, optimize, reinforce, tailor, and honor anything. Like it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Right. So I wrote down existing assets, people, places, health and wellness, sustainability and resilience, community resources. Like those are the buzzwords in each section. But I have no, like, I think this is great. I actually think like being able to point to this and use this. And are we doing these things that aren't necessarily NORTH, but they are the things buried inside NORTH that are really important. So I do look at sort of the second, third, fourth words of each one. And I think it's great. I think it's great work. And we need things that are catchy and people see and they notice and they can point to and they like refer back to. And so I don't think epiphysic is going to be very good. I wouldn't go that way. So I think this is great. And the note I had is when we're talking about stuff, is it covering these 5 pieces? And if we notice we're constantly never addressing number 4 or number 5, maybe that's an issue, right? And so are we doing a good job of pointing back to this as we're looking at different things we do over time? And I'm not saying we are or not. I'm saying over time, asking ourselves that question. And I think the last one is maybe the hardest. It's sort of like, in which way are we honoring community resources and which resources are we talking about? Like, and how's that different from nurturing existing assets? Like if it's about people, so just kind of thinking, how do we, I see multiple times where I feel like the NORT is being called out. Maybe less often I'm seeing obvious moments of H, but maybe I am conflating or I should be conflating those two. So anyway, it's just kind of my only thought on this. I like it a lot. I think it'll be really useful and I hope we use it as a tool for a decade.
Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's catchy. My concern is that it prioritizes, and I don't think that's the priority list. And that's one of my issues with it. People will focus on the N and the O, and then everything else will. And I'd be curious to see how we implement this so that those are the 5 priorities, not it's in 1, 2, 3, 4 through 5 order, because it feels like it's in an order and I don't care for that, especially given that resilience, which doesn't mention, this is my overreaching thing for the entire document, there is so little conversation about wildfire mitigation. I wanted to ask your point. You had mentioned a couple of times it says about mitigation for parks. I think it was because there was no selection opportunity for the public to choose mitigation on open space. You only designated that as parks in the open houses, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think it's parks and open space that requires the mitigation to protect all things, people, structures, but that also includes plants, animals, like all of nature is also being preserved from like wildfire, floods, all of that. And I unfortunately, and I think that is an exceptionally high priority for this community. And it feels like it's maybe we mention it in the document instead of a leading, priority. That's one of my, so those are my concerns with it. Thank you.
Others? Comments about the guiding principles. I think it is a good thought in here, by the way, to take our mind away from the NORTH and look more closely at the substance of the, because we don't want the tail wagging the dog. Tail's very nice. It's catchy, but the dog is more important here, I think. So maybe if we can focus as you are, and Councilmember Dickinson did. Are there other comments about these? Does that mean, for those of you who haven't said anything, are you comfortable with the thrust of each one of these? The rest of you, not you'd explain to, yeah. Councilman.
So I guess I sort of have the same concern, although I'll ask it as a question, which is, it's not clear to me in this part or any of the other parts of the document whether there is a priority. Like, does the ordering of the list, is it meant to communicate priority, or is it just a list? Yeah, I mean, both this and the balance of the sections. It's a question I had throughout, is whether there's intended to be a priority associated with the numbering, or whether it's just a list.
With respect to the goal statements and the numbering that I buck through, is there a priority to that? Is that?
Yeah, or this or anything else. I mean, tell us which aspects are prioritized, which are not.
NORTH is intended to be holistically understood. There's no priority on the screen.
Got
They
it.
all matter. Every time the department looks at a project or initiative or campaign, they're always going to point back to NORTH equally. So there's not a priority. That's why the north, it works very nicely, because it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the goals, right? I walked through there and I kind of talked about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Recently at the Open Space Advisory Board, the conversation was, are these prioritized in that order? And we all came to the conclusion that we should eliminate the number on the goals, because again, all the goals matter. So there's not necessarily a priority when it comes to the goals. Now, give me some leeway here. You really do need to look at the draft plan to understand how contextually all this comes together. We're just having this conversation at this point. But I truly believe that the goals are also equal. But the strategies and the action plans, that's when the priorities start to occur. So you're not going to have enough money, you're not going to have enough staff, you're not going to have enough time to do all those things. That's where the implementation plan, the chapter called implementation plan, is now going to start prioritizing these things. That's where the crux to happen. So that's why we purposely are not wanting to talk about action plans now, because that's another heavy lift discussion.
And so, I mean, it looks like what we have now includes more action items than the last draft, but you're saying there's additional action plan content that we haven't yet seen.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what I was referring to this particular slide. Oh gosh, sorry, this one. The action items down below, you haven't seen that. We will be presenting that as part of the draft plan.
So we have a bunch of action items in the packet.
Those, well, what I mean is tonight, we're really talking about goals and strategies.
Okay. I guess let me just make sure I'm clear. We have a full draft plan in the packet, or the thing in the packet is short of a full draft plan?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, what's in the packet is the framework. So the goals, strategies, action items, just basically in a table format. What they're preparing is, when we say full draft plan, the text, the explanation, the background, the context, that creates a booklet.
Got it.
I don't know how many 100 pages that, whatever it ends up being. So this is just the backbone that plan's extrapolated from. The content's here, but what I will say, the action items are in the last week, up to this packet deadline. So there hasn't been prioritization, there hasn't been refinement of language. This was more just like a first pass to try to capture what the steps would be, actionable items would be. But like he's saying, there's a lot of work to do on those. So a lot of refinements needed. We recognize that. So we're trying to focus on the higher level. The other thing in terms of the numbers, as we were developing this for our own brains, where the numbers are helpful is to tie strategies and even action items to the goal. So to say goal 1, strategy 1.1, strategy 1.2, strategy 1.3. So we've heard feedback that psychologically our human nature wants to associate number one with the most important. So we can definitely do that. The challenge will be, how do we track that information throughout the sub levels? And that open to any and all ideas that you guys have on how to do that. If we take away a number or we take away a letter, we lose some context of how we refer to that. So that's a challenge we can work through, but the numbers were intended more for organizational purposes than to try to communicate the number one priority.
That's helpful. Thank you. I do think that maybe in the final plan, a little explanation of that would be a good idea.
Just if I could, just real quickly, there are currently 7 chapters in the long range plan, and there are currently 5 chapters in the trail system plan. Of course, you haven't seen any of this, right? Staff hasn't seen it. We're writing this as we speak. The first is an introduction, it's context, it's putting, getting an understanding, and it's the demographics, the population, and we just continue to build through it forward, much like what you saw with the comp plan, right? It isn't until you get to the last chapter, the implementation plan, where you see the action items. So we're excited about presenting this information to you, but we've got some work to do to keep refining it and getting staff comments first.
Thank you.
Others, yes. Councilmember Fahey.
Yeah, I have a question on the priorities. At the open houses, you had setups of jars that you're supposed to put your little balls in. And those were priorities, and you put the ball in your top priority or whatever. How did that enter into developing this? And how do we know what the public's high priorities were?
No, thank you for that question. Much like that matrix table that you have in front of you, that's simply trying to show you what we're hearing from the 4 advisory boards. The public engagement has 5 or 6 different tiers of information gathering. The marble jars were very early on. It's one simple metric. The statistically valid survey is a major metric that we're using to understand what the community preferences are on all of these things that we're talking about. The dot exercises are another metric, right? The list goes on, the pop-up events where we did marble jars. All of these things cumulatively are being analyzed, and we're putting it into a community engagement summary report to show you how all these different metrics align. Did we hear something at a pop-up event that's unusually different than what we heard at these other 5 metric points? Right. And I got just a good example. One of the pop-up events out there at Davison Mesa Trailhead, a woman came up, and she's a resident of Boulder County, and she talked about how she's actively involved in the Boulder County ambassador program for trails.
Wow.
And so we talked about that, and there is no ambassador program for volunteerism in Louisville to raise awareness and talk to people on the trails to monitor things. So that was a touch point that we heard. One thing. We didn't hear it anywhere else, right? And so we're embedding that into the concept plan. Think about developing an ambassador program. So it's a cumulative effort to take all these data points and then present it back to you to show you quite clearly and with transparency what we've heard.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments about guiding principles? Yes, Councilmember Reese. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So I think with the guiding principles, we're certainly headed in the right direction. And I like the attempts to make an acronym that we can just easily refer to in conversations. So I look forward to seeing how this gets fleshed out and what the final wording is that we land on. The one piece of this that I'm struggling with, because I'm putting on my hat of like, if I were a council member in 3 to 5 years looking at this document, is there any ambiguity that would make it difficult for me to figure out how to apply this to my work and policy? And the one I keep coming back to is the O. I keep stumbling on this one. When I read it at first, it felt like a public works title. And then as I'm going in and looking at the little paragraph underneath, I'd like to see this one fleshed out a little bit more, because I'm struggling to think of how I would use this to, in the future. I don't know if anyone else has struggled with this one, but I don't know what strengthen connections means when it applies to these other things. Maybe I'm just dense.
No,
I
that
don't know.
we were trying to hit at
Mm.
once, kind of tied to trails. So there's a lot of input and engagement about trail connectivity and connecting both pros amenities and also different areas of town. So that was the attempt. But what I hear is we could tighten that language to help connect those dots.
Yeah, because I was
Further
also
sure.
thinking of like social connections too.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I think really trying to hammer out what we're trying to get at would be
For sure. Yeah, that's great feedback. And that's the type of thing where Keith has said that a lot of these board meetings have been super helpful, is getting that fresh set of eyes on things
Yeah.
and asking like, when I see that word, I think X, Y, and Z. Is that what you mean? And we're like, oh, no, no, no. So that's great feedback for if we have an O, how do we tie that better to the trails plan if that's our intent?
Yeah, the other ones make more sense to me. That one I was just struggling with. So, okay, cool. I look forward to seeing
To
it
your
come.
point, it is about social connections too. So the implementation plan, the action matrix table that we've been speaking about, will have all of these divisions, all of these goals, all these strategies and action plans. It'll have a series of tables that says high, medium, and low priority. It could be 1 to 3 years, 3 to 6 years, 6 to 10 years. It will then have another column that says who's responsible for it. Is it public works? Is it parks? Is it, facilities? And then there might be another column that says, how do we tie it back to this? Does that actionable item, Brian's going to go out there and build a 1/4 mile of trails. Does it relate back to this? And we're going to try to embed the NORTH into that matrix table. So it's directly assigning those elements into the strategic implementation plan. We haven't vetted that out yet. I'm not guaranteeing that it will be successful, but that's the intent.
I had a couple of points. It sounds like you've heard some fairly significant pushback on North. I'm going to actually give the most pushback on that because I think it's putting round pegs in square hole or square pegs in round holes. I think I appreciate the attempt to do it. I just don't think that it's going to end up being something that's going to be workable. It maybe you will, maybe you'll surprise me. But I find some of these they're all over the place. Some of each of the topics, and I don't know. I think, and the second point that I had is this reminds me very much of the first discussion we had about the comp plan vision. We spent an enormous amount of time talking about the vision statement. I think that's actually a good thing. I don't know that we needed that much time, but the problem was we struggled with some of those values. They're very difficult to get right. I think we did a pretty good job in the end, but it took a bit of time to get those right. They certainly, if I'm remembering correctly, didn't have as much text. We were able to kind of boil it down. I think the other thing you could think about doing if I don't know whether people agree with me about the North, but you could put it around in the circle just as easily, perhaps, to avoid the hierarchical piece, because I think that actually is pretty significant. As Councilmember Kern just said, it's you don't want these values or principles to be in lexical order, in order of importance, because you're going to end up taking away. I just looked at this and it takes away, just the visual takes away from what the point is, which is to say, if I'm understanding it correctly, what are the most important things that are going to guide all of the rest of it? What's the big vision here? And, whether you use, I don't mean to I sort of meant to throw cold water on it, but I think really hard about whether you're capturing the real values that we're talking about here. A number of them have been discussed, or whether you're missing them. And if you're missing them, get them right and then figure out the acronym. That would be my suggestion, but that's just me. But I think you are getting some sense that it's not necessarily in the right order. Yep. Councilman.
I apologize. I brought it up first. I actually think that's kind of what they did. Like, I think our main principles are here, and they found an acronym by using words like nurture, optimize, reinforce. Like, what they did is they found our 5 major guiding principles, and then they found some letters that would make an acronym. And it isn't the NORTH that they fit it into. They didn't start with North and like, God, how can we get goals inside North? They had the 5 goals, and they got some sort of random words to get an acronym. Now, if it's in a circle or if it's a North Star, like, I don't really care either way. But I think the point is we aren't, it could be Thorn. We're not focused on the NORTH. We're focused on the second and third words. And so I apologize for kind of bringing it up. I actually think it's catchy. It means something, whether it's in a circle or a straight line. I think it actually kind of solves the issue we're concerned about. It's like, hey, they're in order. Like, no, they're not. They're clearly just a word. So there is no hierarchy of importance. They made a word, and so they're randomly, I see it as they're randomly assigned. And of course, if it was Thorn, that'd be awesome for you because the T would be first, right? But it's like, the point is it's random. And so there is no order here. They're just following some letters that make it all a thing. And hey, North Star points, this is our goal. So actually, I think it's very catchy. I like it a lot. And I think, to your point, Mayor, that North isn't the point. The point is all the stuff we're doing inside of it. So I respectfully think they crushed it in doing what you're asking them to do. Are these our guiding principles? And I think they are. And I don't have something that's missing from it. So I'm happy with it. I just wanted to reinforce that because I'm the one who started the conversation about it. Sorry.
It sounds, well, yeah. Oh,
So if we remove the North, remove the top sentence, the bold sentence, and focus on the first sentence in each category, which is maintain and invest, strengthen the connections, foster inclusive programs, shape plans and practices, and provide high quality services and community benefits, does that hit the mark? Because those are the core beliefs that we pulled from the community survey and from all of the needs assessment and all of the documents that we had. Those were the core principles that we had pulled from there. And you're right, Caleb, that's what we did, is we pulled those core principles and then said, how could we make this into a acronym or something to take off the weight of numbers or order or something like that. So those key principles are those first sentences right there. So if you want to look at those, and do those meet our department? Because those met what was asked for from the community, from our open houses.
Thoughts?
I think that the North is a wonderful idea. And I think it does get all of the priorities, as you said, all of the priorities are there. And this is just a way to very clearly and creatively say, here you go. It's not pointing out one priority over the other. And like you said, if you go with the first sentence in each one, that's what's important in the whole document. So I am good with keeping it the way it is. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
I mean, I think it's better to have some short description of the longer description, rather than just a longer description. I have some minor quibbles with the North, but I think it's fine. Because it's a word, I didn't really feel like it was prioritizing. I think the one thing I would just reiterate was that I felt like in the top one, under N, nurture, that it wasn't as forward looking or as I was hoping.
Councilmember Kern.
Sorry. Since everyone's like getting into the details, the thing for me that I liked about the reinforced commitment to health and wellness was actually the statement below it. And like you said, that was actually the more important piece, which is the foster inclusive programs. I think emphasizing inclusivity as being a high priority, meaning it's in the top 5 core principles. I would like to see that be the word that says reinforce our commitment to inclusivity, health and wellness, because it is the main, that was, so those are the things for me. If there's a key thing in the description, which is where, what you pulled, right? Let's make sure that is in that bold, like that ties to the acronym. So. Who is the primary user of this document? Is it all of you in moving forward in future years and like looking to what you want to do, what you want to present to the community and to future councils?
Yeah, there's a lot of answers to that question. So the primary user is going to be future staff who use this as their guidebook for what to request from future city councils, for how to communicate to future city managers, and to how to relay information to future advisory boards. So it's really meant to be, it's not a like best laid plans, right? Like the 2012 plan didn't include a future pandemic, flood, and fire. That, you know, has led a lot of that to be in this still. And so, but yeah, at a holistic upper level, like we invest in this and we appreciate the support of council and city managers to invest in it so that we have a reference point with really good community engagement on where we want to go in the next 10 years. And then in 10 years from now, these youth advisory board members are going to be the adults with children who will be engaged from a different perspective. So that's where we start, though, is staff guided. Yeah.
That'll be fun when they're in their 30s for them to go back and look at what their comments were when they were 15. That'll be fun.
Yeah, they only have themselves to blame.
People are like, was I planning for my future or my present? So I think given the who the primary user is and that your goal is to just really, you know, provide for the community what they're asking for, I'd say if this allows you guys to best understand, or like you think future staff to understand the needs, then stick with it. We're not the people sitting here that are specifically using it. We're going to be listening to all of you. So make sure that you know that the people you're going to be bringing in to take over can follow it the best. And that would be my, and that's why, like, for a lot of this, I was like, I mean, this is a tremendous amount of work for all of you. And I can't thank you enough. I mean, this is big work. Like, we thought the comp plan was big. This is equally as big. The level of detail that was in this was really difficult to even try to read through the course of a weekend. But to be honest, I like pieced it out to get through it. That's how much work you all have and this is not even all of it, have done. So I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't meant to be like a community document, like in its detail. That was meant for you to be able to build upon, right? Okay, good. Thank you.
Could I just add just one? Historically, the way these plans are written, they're very technical, and they're written for that audience right there, right, internal. But there's been a shift to make sure that it's also presented to the community so that it's an educational piece. It's something that the community can be inspired by. And so we've been shifting away from writing, 150, 200 page, word after word after word, table after table, to breaking it out into smaller pieces where the trails plan and the long range plan are actually more magazine style presentation. So you can flip through it quickly and go, oh, I get it. If you see that page, I get it. And you can flip through the other pages and get it. If you really wanted to go to the implementation chapter, you can do that. If you really wanted to go to the needs assessment, technical reports, and the community engagement summary, you can go to those documents as well. But we're splitting those all out so it's more user friendly for the average person in the community to read it as well. So it's dual purposes. It's definitely for staff, but it's also for the community.
It sounds as though, number one, people are comfortable with the North, and that's good. I threw that in there because I wanted to move the discussion ahead, and I'm glad we actually were doing that. And it sounds like some of the language on the goals needs to be adjusted a bit. I think there's some really good specific suggestions. from Mayor Pro Tem, from Councilmember Kern, particularly on that. And you can come back, with the next draft, and I think probably resolve those things. It sounds as though from our discussion, there's nothing in here that is apart from maybe a little bit more discussion or mention of resiliency or wildlife or wildfire concerns, perhaps, that we're missing in this sort of very general initial set of values. Why don't we go on? Because I think the others will come faster, is my sense of it. And we're sticking with, we've essentially solved part of the problem or part of the issue because we've dealt with the guiding principle. So it's really the goals on each one of these sections that I think we probably ought to focus on. To the extent there's a conversation that people want to have, we'll get that, but we'll do that afterward. That if there are additional, if the challenges need to be kind of clarified, that's fine. But I think we'll start with the goals and see how we do that. And then after we get those finished, then we'll take public comment about what we've discussed. If we need further clarification, we can do that. So on the draft parks goals, and again, these are not meant to be in order of priority, right? And you explained that before, and I think that made perfect sense unless somebody has a strong disagreement. I think you got to have something like that in here to try to tie things together as you've been describing. But how about these? Have they caught any, or some of them ones that you think shouldn't be in there? Or do you think there's some that aren't in here that should be in here? Mayor Pro Tem. And then Councilmember Cooperman.
So I'll tee this up with just a broad comment so I don't have to repeat it in every section, and then something specific to parks. So as we were going through this tonight, one of the things that came to mind is smart goals. And I think we're going to head in that direction based on the high, medium, low timelines you mentioned that'll happen once we clean up and create our final draft. But I think that's an approach. I would like to see some version of that because I think it'll help hold us all accountable to this document over the years. As it relates specifically to parks, I had a question about number 3, about park maintained properties. Does that include medians as well? Okay. I think somehow calling out medians in our draft at some point, if it isn't already being planned, is a really important thing to consider. Go ahead.
Yeah, it would also, not to interrupt, but it would also, so we call it streetscapes. We can say what
Yeah.
that means, but
Yeah.
it also, we forget sometimes that the cemetery is included in that as well,
Yeah.
right? So I think
So-
that's a good point.
Yeah, I think those sorts of things would be helpful to make sure we spell out clearly, so we know how they tie into these goals.
Okay, Councilmember Cooperman.
Yeah. To actually follow up on my previous comment, I felt like aside from number 2, there's not much that speaks again to sort of future facilities, in particular future parks. I don't know if we want to put something into one of the goals or one of the strategies around future parks, and particularly looking at equitable distribution of parks throughout the community.
Councilmember Hefner, and then Councilmember Fahey.
Yeah, I'll just echo the Mayor Pro Tem's comment about moving in the direction of SMART goals. I do think as we get down into the finer grain strategies and action items, we're going to need substantially more detail, and in particular detail around priorities, right? Like if these are in no particular order, if we're prioritizing existing assets, but also developing new assets, but also trying to maintain funding for all of that, that's sort of a zero sum, at least as we approach it now. I'm hoping we find our pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but we need some framework to, well, how do we assess the trade-off between replacing an existing playground versus building a new one versus building sports fields versus whatever. And if we just have a long list of things that are all equally important, I think it's hard to sort of make those trade-offs and judgment calls about what direction we're trying to head.
Councilmember Fahey?
And my one concern is on number 4, it says cultivate a diverse, healthy, and adaptable urban forest. My concern with that is that this naturally is a high mountain desert, and trying to maintain an urban forest in a desert with the lower water amounts that we're going to be getting for the next however many years is going to be challenging and perhaps foolish. So either eliminate that line or change it to urban natural environment.
Yes, Councilmember Dickens.
Yeah, I'll just briefly echo, and this will be for similar to Mayor Pro Tem, all the topics of tonight, that need for an understanding of prioritization, of just we want all these things and we can't have all these things. We certainly can't have all of them all at one time, right? So there's timing and there's otherwise, but as I say, if you prioritize everything, you don't prioritize anything. And so I think that's fine if that's not today, but I think that's kind of the crux of it, is like, yeah, there's 100 things we want to do, but which ones are we going to do and when, and what is that strategic roadmap that gets us to those things? And so I'm excited for that part of the conversation to come. And I think that will be a really tough conversation, because not even just competing, like we talk about open space versus like affordable housing, like, ooh, how do we use that land? It's like, oh no, we're going to do both right next to each other. Just which one do we do first? Right. So we're not even talking about competing. We're just talking about like timing and funding. And so that it's a really tough topic. And I think I just want to make sure we're not over promising by saying, these are the 100 things we're going to do. We'll get to 2 of them this year. And I don't think that's accurate, but yeah, I'll stop there. I just think it's really important.
Others? Okay. Should we move to the next one? Again, on recreation and senior center goals, there are ones missing, are there ones that need to be changed, et cetera, Mayor Pro Tem?
I'll use this section as an example of something maybe we can apply to like all the sections. Because I have specific examples of a few that feel more like strategies rather than goals. So the one that really sticks out to me is 3. That feels like a strategy that should be implemented consistently across different goals rather than its own separate goal. And I could pick out a few others in this document, but I'll just leave that example there and let you all kind of sort through if there's any other opportunities to extract something for a strategy rather than a goal.
Did you talk to Keith today?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Did you talk to Keith today?
No, are Keith and
No.
I vibing right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
he literally, to give him some credit, he told me that on the phone earlier today. He said, this whole idea about data, he's like, that goal at the end, he's like, that kind of applies to everybody. He's like, we should rethink that and think about how that applies to everybody at the strategy level. So
There we go.
here we are.
Good work, Keith.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Kern.
Am I missing in this list of goals the mention about senior services?
That's number 2, the lifelong health and wellness social connection. So under that, the strategies start to talk about seniors, youth, etc.
So actually, so there is no specific mention of the largest growing population in the city. So the youth population is declining, the senior population is exploding, and yet it's not one of the 7 priorities, like as a line item list, but we do for the pools. So I'm just thinking that that seems to be a really high priority for this community and probably should be for our staff, that we are not just maintaining, but continuing to expand and improve upon our senior services. As excellent as they are, they can always be even better. And I think we want to make sure that we're planning for the capacity for them as well. So, I mean, I hearing people make the comments of, oh my gosh, it's so busy, it's so packed, we can't get in, there's no room. I just want to make sure that our seniors don't get forgotten, displaced, and blended in to everything. I think it should be its own priority.
I wonder, Councilmember Kern, I mean, it's a great point. In the strategy section, it mentions sustain and where feasible expand senior. Does that help address that concern? Or are you saying it specifically has to be called out in a goal?
Yeah, I think if we're going to say, like, we want to call out some of these other things, that I think it should be one of the goals of our community, is that that needs to be a high enough of a priority that it isn't a subset of something, that it should be something that we continue to maintain. I did see this in here. It just says, I think it was under the strategy 2, it says sustain and enhance senior wellness and social programs. And then it just says maintain senior programming. And so that's where I thought raising it to a higher level of awareness, because the next 10, 20 years in this community, that is the fastest growing consumer. It's the fastest growing population of residents. And if we're not planning for that, my concern is we will fall behind in servicing them.
Anyone else? Councilmember Cooperman.
To ask one question about number 6. Are we specifically calling out aquatics because of the challenges regarding our current use of the aquatics infrastructure?
Yeah, this was mentioned several times in different community engagement efforts, that the aquatic center is over capacity. We need to address it. So it's specifically to that, but there are other aspects of the rec center and senior center that are also over capacity.
Mm-hmm.
The aquatics component tends to be a very costly element.
Yeah.
Difficult to maintain.
It's also in reference, you saw in the community survey, there's a lot of attention through this process focused on the future of Memory Square Pool and aquatics programming demand. I think that goes back to Councilmember Kern's point also about senior programming. It's, one of the primary growth areas for senior programming and demand is aquatics related. So as we invest in that aquatics infrastructure and programming growth throughout the community, are we keeping in mind what types of programming we're going to do, as well as what kind of infrastructure enhancements we need to do? So it's called out. Just again, back to Keith's point, though, I don't think it's unique to this community that the aquatics facilities get a ton of attention from the community because they're so centric to health and wellness of 6 months old learning all the way up, through senior age for the exercise. So it's really popular with community feedback.
Okay. No, I mean, I'm fine with it being called out. I just wanted to understand a little bit more calling that out versus other aspects of recreation. Yeah, I mean, the only other comment I had, again, is sort of similar to a couple of previous comments. Again, sort of aside from 6, there's not a lot in the goals that speak to, what sort of other resources we might need in the future.
I can piggyback on a couple of points that have been made. On 6, I looked at this and sort of plan for the long-term future of aquatics infrastructure program. Well, all of this is planning. I'm not sure that necessarily adds anything, but to Councilmember Cooperman's point, maybe it's not just aquatics infrastructure and program. Maybe it's other kinds of current and novel or up and coming, whatever the words are. It might be good to include that or to embrace it. The second thing is I'm torn about the senior piece of it. I think to Mayor Pro Tem's point, I think it's very important to include that in strategies, especially, not to to have really specific strategies relating to that. I'm not so sure I want that called out in the goals. And here's why. I think I'm worried that in mentioning seniors at one place, somebody can look at that and say, well, this other thing isn't as important to seniors. Just simply throwing seniors into one of the goals or whatever doesn't strike me as necessarily a good thing, because I think you could look at it, and you don't want to put it in every single one of them. Also, on the issue of how the future looks. I mean, we are in our comp plan really trying to address the issue of younger families. I likewise don't want to put that in here specifically, even though probably each one of these touches young families too, and there might be a good place to put those in strategies. I think, I have problem I'd have a problem knowing which of these things to mention in terms of seniors, because all of them are issues relating to seniors, not just, one or the other. I mean, operational sustainability, resilience, and efficiency, definitely. Aquatics, definitely. The wellness, the lifelong wellness spans from, as you say, 6 months to 90 years. So I don't know. I think it's okay not to call them out. I just worry calling them out is going to minimize others. But other comments? Yes, Councilmember Kern.
It's interesting though, because this is a recreation and senior center. If we had a separate senior center, you call out each one of the other things. The golf course has a line item, parks has a line item, open space has a line item. Rec and senior is combined because we have our senior center within our rec center. And I do think it is worth addressing. I think a lot of times it gets pushed to the side in a lot of ways, like, oh, it's what you walk past when you're going into the rec center. This is a place for our seniors to go. It's a place for them to, be a part of the community when they're not able to participate in maybe everything else. It's specific to them because they have specific needs. We have an amazing kid and teen programming, and we focus a lot of time and effort. We hear from our seniors, in the wintertime, we get to use, or during school season, we get to use the gym for for senior things. But when school's out, all the kids are the priority. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying we want to make certain that we lift this and as a community and as the staff, since that's who's using this, that they understand this is a rec and senior center. And yet it is a subset of everything, where it is not a subset, it is its own programming entity within the building. So that's the only reason, Mayor, that I was wanting that to be called out. And I will say in some communities, they do have a separate senior center. They don't blend them, right? So it reaches that kind of priority level. I think it's Highlands Ranch that has a brand new, phenomenal senior center. And so it gets addressed separately. And I don't want us to forget and like make that a lower level of importance when we're focusing on some other new and added things.
We're getting rid of 3. So if you can come up, I'm not going to die on this hill. I think coming up with language that's not redundant of the others is a challenge. But I'll leave that to others. Okay. Why don't we move to the golf course?
Can I ask one question quickly
sure.
on that? If it was more prevalent in the strategies, like throughout the strategies of different goals, do you think that would elevate it enough, or you really want it to have its own goal?
Would it elevate for you as staff enough if it's that way? Because that's where I'd like to make sure that all of you are feeling that, since it's your document primarily. So wherever that will get the best level of recognition and attention is where I'd like to see that. So it helps you. Thank you.
Councilmember Fay, are you on to golf course or are you back at?
I want to add on to this particular topic
Okay.
and emphasize my desire to have the senior center emphasized in its needs, in its development, and its expansion because of the increased numbers of seniors that are going to be participating. And the numbers of programs that we could provide for them will just make it more usable and helpful for the seniors.
Right. Any other part about the rec and senior center? Right. Let's move on to the Coal Creek Golf Course goals.
Mr. Merrick, you mentioned
Sure.
item number 3 and rec as going away.
I think the
that what-
comment was that it was more of a strategy that's
Okay.
going to
All
affect
right.
everything.
Clarify.
Not that we're going to eliminate data as an issue. That I don't think that was the point that Mayor Pro Tem was making. Okay. And I gathered from the nods around the table that that was something that everybody agreed with as a good general comment. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Coal Creek Golf Course. Cooperman.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see either a new goal or something in one of the existing goals that refers back more strongly to the T in the north around sustainability and resilience. There are a variety of things that the golf course has done on both of those fronts, but I'd like to see more in the future along both fronts as well. And yeah, I think that's my main comment.
Others, yes. Councilmember Dickinson.
I think one thing that I feel is missing, but I may not have consensus on that, is sort of this is a city course, right? Which is, a public city course, which is not unusual, but is special. And so some sort of goal of like increasing resident usage. I think the percentage, I'm trying to remember what the percentage is. My memory has like 25% resident, 75% non-resident usage. And so thinking about like, are there ways to, and this isn't a membership thing, right? It's like, I'm a resident and I don't go there that we talked about some of those battles of like, I can't get a tea time because I'm not a member. So as a resident, I go to Indian Peaks. So like a goal of increasing resident utilization of our city golf course, right? Like it's a city of Louisville golf course. Our residents should go here first. So I don't mean to muck it up in the debate we're having around memberships. It's a separate, actually a separate issue, but I don't know if there's support from others to that is a goal that we should want that, because it could sort of damage number 2, right? Like it doesn't have to, you can increase prices on outside and not increase prices on insight in that. That might change your utilization numbers without changing your finances. But just wondering if there's any interest from council in either including it in one of the five or adding a sixth goal to simply, increase resident utilization.
I think it's a great call out. And I would be supportive of it being a strategy. I think it could fall under a few of these different goals here. I won't sit here and read them, but that's where I would land on this. And then I also want to double click on Councilmember Cooperman's comments regarding the T and North. That was something I was going to mention too. It's a very resource intensive, right? Resource that we have. And so I'd love to see some goals around that.
This Councilmember Hefner.
I'll just repeat a different version of my earlier comment, which is this is another area where we need clear prioritization of trade-offs. I think in relatively recent history, we've heard from the golf community both that golf is far too expensive and that we need a brand new clubhouse facility. And it is difficult for us to square those, right? If we're going to continue to provide bargain golf, we cannot also provide country club level facilities. And I think trying to get down from essentially a wish list to more of a plan would be super helpful to me.
Councilmember Kern.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo Councilmember Hefner's comments. That would be much appreciated and be helpful for us and future councils, because I think that's a goal that's going to take a while to accomplish personally. I agree though. I like Councilmember Dickinson's comments about the golf course being more user-friendly to our community members. It's a public course. It's sort of not a city course. It's not Louisville Golf Course. It is Coal Creek, and it does work as its own entity. We as taxpayers don't pay for it unless it's like a super mega pinch. So it does provide for itself. So I think in that respect, but you're right. And maybe it isn't, maybe it's something as simple as like, if it, sort of like with the rec center, if there's classes, like the residents are allowed to register for classes a couple of days before non-residents can. Maybe it should be something similar with the golf course. And I think, and as far as using the clubhouse, it would be great. Yeah. If it was more something that everybody felt comfortable going into versus you didn't golf or you're a non-golfer and you feel excluded, not even like, oh, I don't have, golf shoes on. It's more like, oh, you're not a golfer? Why are you here? So it would be really lovely if it was a place where lots of people went. Like if I just wanted to do like a chip and putt because my shoulder's bummed out for a year, I would feel just as welcome spending my money and spending an afternoon with other friends because it is my community golf course versus, again, like feeling more welcome to do that in other communities' golf courses. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And 100%. The T is absolutely missing. We just recently had an incident, and I am so thankful to all of you and to our golf manager for being safety conscious in a high level drought to ban smoking on the golf course as to hopefully not accidentally ignite a fire that could be challenging to put out with reduced water resources. So I think that goes to that resilient piece and the sustainability. So I appreciate that.
Yes, maybe a little out of turn, but just to, I guess, notate the discussion about residents' use and that kind of thing. It's going to be part of the ongoing discussion with the Finance Committee as we establish the fees for 2027 philosophies, that kind of thing moving forward. We're going to try to be more transparent and open with kind of where we're at financially. So it goes to one of the goals, but I also think that shorter term, not just the next 10 years moving forward and what's adopted in this document, it's going to be a topic of conversation for that group and then by default, the full council. So that topic's coming.
I had several points on this. A number of them have been made, so I'm not going to make those again, but I think there is something that really is missing in terms of talking about its relationship with the Louisville community in particular. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. I think the council member Dickinson suggested something. I'm not quite sure in number 4 what Coal Creek community means, whether that's the golfing group, the people who do golf, or whether it is Louisville, or whether it's people around the course. What was that? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's an attempt to do what you all are sort of talking about, that is broaden the limited scope that some people have of the facility, broaden it to think about other ways of using the facility, be more welcoming to people that are non-golfers, welcoming because you're a Louisville resident. It's somewhat abstract, but it's intended to broaden the perception that it's not just a golf course.
It may be good then not to just say continue, continue to deliver certain programming, because we're talking about expanding kind of, it's not, I mean, it's not even just programming, it's services. It's, you know, if you're trying to get people to have weddings out there, and I'm not saying that that's a good idea, but if you were trying to do that, that's a service. And not a program. And if you're trying to get people to eat out there, different story. But you get the idea. I too have some concerns about sort of financial sustainability. I'm not sure it's just ensuring the long-term financial, it's short-term, medium-term, and long-term, frankly. And I think the third one, you know, it's not just investing, it's maintaining those improvements or the infrastructure that we have. You know, and I share the concern about calling out a specific goal. I don't think it does it here, but a specific goal of having a new clubhouse. I think that is a very complicated thing. Who pays for that? How big it is, all that kind of stuff. Whole different can of worms. I like the way you did it because you're just talking about infrastructure more generally. So those are my comments. I think a lot of really good suggestions about the goals, I think, around the table. Anything else for the good of the order before we move on? Okay. Let's go down to open space. I'm sure there's just zero discussion about this. Am I right? Okay, let's move on. No. How about the open space goals? Thoughts? I mean, you'd mentioned something which we certainly know to be the case, which is that there are really strong advocates for just about every piece of the open, for preservation, for maintenance, for the use, the non-use of open space, and it's hard to capture that in goals. I appreciate your attempt to do that. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think, we've received quite a bit of feedback via email from some different folks in the community, and I think they bring up some good points that, in my opinion, a number of those things fall more into strategy rather than goals. So I think once we get towards talking about strategies, open space is a unique opportunity to reference our charter to make sure that our strategies align with that charter and everything outlined there. So I think where we stand as far as goals is tonight, I think we're headed in the right direction. And I think there might be a little bit more of a meaty conversation around the strategies where I think a lot of that feedback could be pulled in, but I don't know if anybody feels differently, if any of the feedback we got is more goal driven than strategy implementation. I'm open to hearing that.
Councilmember Cooperman.
I largely agree with that comment. I think maybe the one exception is goal number 1, where on the one hand, I feel like the first 6 words is kind of a mouthful. And maybe aligning that more closely with the language of the charter would not only make it clear, but would also give us better alignment.
Councilmember Kern.
Again, I think kind of like with the goal in parks with sustainability and resilience. And I think if we're saying we're prioritizing open space natural resource management, a very big component moving forward for the future of this community, one of those is wildfire mitigation for natural resource management. And the reason I think it absolutely has to be in open space is over and over and over, Fire Department, Boulder County's Office of Disaster Management reinforces to us that that is going to be a critical barrier to help us prevent the next wildfire. They are actually now attributing the successful, snuffing out of the fire in North Glen a couple of weeks ago with the fact that they had just mowed the day before their open space. And they believe if they had not done that, they would have had houses lost and then a conflagration fire. And so I think that we absolutely, one of the goals of open space must be to help wildfire mitigation wherever we want to tuck it in. Because if it's not a goal, we need to figure out why it's not a goal. Thank you.
Other comments? Councilmember Hafner.
I would just say this area in particular needs, I know we're not talking about the action items, but of the action items we've seen, that they need, I think, substantial work and detail from where they are now.
Other comments? A couple of comments that I had. The term maintenance is kind of used in the first one, kind of gets lost, I think, but it's not in the first one. Sorry. The second one, maintaining inventories, plans, procedures. I'm concerned about maintaining infrastructure. Maintaining, I mean, you could use that in a whole bunch of different ways. Even the infrastructure, I mean, you could use just maintenance of the land, and I think that's kind of missing in here, the concept, because we've talked about it. Certainly when we've discussed the comp plan, we had a lot of discussion about that. I think that's something that may be an extra goal. I think it should be its own goal personally. I'm not quite sure I understand the fourth, whether promoting ecological benefits and equitable access, or whether that's the right list. I think each of those is obviously really important, but does it exclude things? Are those the primary ways we're enhancing open space system? I understand those two things. You want to get in there somewhere. I don't know the best way to do it. It just struck me as kind of an odd thing. I don't want to get into too much of the wordsmithing, but it just seemed like an odd list. Yes, go ahead.
So we had a lot of focus on that one at the last OSAB meeting on goal 4. And there was a general consensus that it was trying to do too much in 2 different directions. So the kind of the sentiment was that the acquisition piece was specific enough to be elevated either into its own goal or to at the least be a strategy under goal number 1. And then that the other two strategies under there were a little more human focused on the kind of passive recreation side. So those two would likely stay together under a kind of a newly worded goal specific to the passive recreation or kind of human component. So yeah, we had quite a bit of discussion with OSAB about how to restructure number 4. So you're spot on there.
And I'll just add number 2 to your point, Ms. Muir. We agree, it's a little bit too wordy, and we're really trying to get at is science-based data. Just having strong, defensible, science-based data. Keep it as simple as that. Update that information regularly and use it for decision-making. So trying to get away from foundational inventories, things like that. Try to say what it's trying to say. It's about the data, updating the data. So we're as earlier today, I was amending that one.
Other comments about any of these? Okay, for right now, I think we'll have other comments in public comment.
I just wanted to say thank you. Under, I'm trying to remember which one it is. Now it's an engagement and education. We had some comments, some emails come in. I love the idea of us enhancing a volunteer program. We have so many people who love being able to be involved, not just users. And so I think that creates a phenomenal opportunity for our community. So thanks for that. Because I know it's a lot of work.
Okay. Is there any other staff comment or consultant comment on that? All right. How about trails? Thoughts?
I'll just say right away, again, today I was kind of editing these and trying to get more specific. Fewer words, more specific. So the number 1 is about connectivity. The second one is about safety. Trying to just get, and then moving down number 2. I know they're not in order, but if we really honor what we've been hearing throughout the study, connectivity and safety rose to the top. Balancing recreational trails with natural resources rose to the top as well. What are the tools to be able to do that? Develop trail standards, address social trails. So there is not a prioritization, but it's a kind of understanding of logical hierarchy and respecting what we heard from the public. So bottom line is the sequence will look a little different.
Councilmember Kern.
Thanks. I was just actually curious because I was hearing some of the early comments too that you guys were making about recreational use trails versus shared use trails. And there was some conversation around like shared use trails or maybe paved or paved and unpaved trails. And are we defining them by the surface type, the location? Because I'm also thinking, I have a note here to ask you to send us a policy list of items that you would like to send to the city manager for the council to review, because it sounds like there might be a couple. Like maybe we want to rethink where we allow bikes or e-bikes, and there might be a distinction, like bikes might be allowed in certain places, but not e-bikes. It may be that there are some recreational trails that are really pedestrian appropriate. Maybe they're near the creek or the riparian areas. And a high-speed vehicle like a bicycle could be very disruptive. And so those are the kind of things I'm curious if you want them to come to us. And speeds again. And then we're talking about use in the open space. There's an equitable use kind of piece about this and access. And I was looking for, and it's probably in here and I just didn't see it. So if it is here, then that's great. But if not, it's like access on the trails for people. A lot of people who have lesser capability, like physical abilities, have a hard time using some of the unpaved trails. And so they can't get access to these locations, or without places to sit in decent intervals, they also reliable places, they can't go out because they can't know if they are able to actually go out and enjoy a spot because they can't walk so far without stopping. And I mean, that's from breathing issues and heart issues to, physical limitations. And I think making sure, I mean, this is such an, like a physically capable community of like athletes in a lot of ways. I mean, I've had many triathlete neighbors over the years, which has always so impressed me. But there are also a lot of people who don't have those same abilities. And it would be lovely if we make sure, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a goal, but if at least could be part of a strategy program to make sure that those people are really considered. I mean, we've been so wonderfully thoughtful saying, let's make sure that like neurodiverse solutions are in our parks. And I think that we need to be looking at when we talk about our trails as well. I think that that's really a smart thing. But again, I would love to understand better this rec use versus shared use and surface, if that's part of what the designation is.
But to you,
Too.
or you, sorry, not to you. Many trails plans take different paths. They might only focus on the recreational trail system in a community. Staff elected to address both the commuter hard surface multi-use system as it relates to the recreational trail system. So it kind of complicates things a little bit, but in fact, it doesn't really complicate it because we're including a matrix table that talks about trail typologies, user experiences, who uses that trail, why do they use that trail, and what do they need to make that user experience better, right? Whether it's seating, amenities, universal access is oftentimes used as a term, access for all. We're using those terms in the draft plan, making sure that all users of all capabilities, those who are visually impaired, those who are wheelchair bound, whatever, they still have the right to be able to use that trail system. And so we're trying to explain this whole dynamic of trail types. And then we're trying to make sure it's very clear who's maintaining, who's operating what trail type. So Public Works has a role, Parks has a role, Open Space has a role. So we're getting into that level of detail with the trails plan, which is not unusual, but as I say earlier, some communities only want to focus on the recreational soft surface trail system. We're not doing that. We're expanding the scope.
Yeah, I love that. I do hear all the time, and I've heard it for the 30 years I've lived here, that people like to be able to get on trails everywhere. So they want to go from one park to another, or from, downtown or to the schools to a park. And so having things connected instead of like, oh, you can ride and walk over here, but you better get in your car and drive if you want to walk like and do something in the other part of town. And same thing with, and I appreciated this in the open space piece, that the connectivity with spaces for animals to get from one to the other, so that we don't have coyotes like having to run through people's neighborhoods or across roads. There's places for them to get from one little open space where they live into another. And I may have missed that on the open space piece to mention the high priority of that, but that kind of ties in with the trails, is like the consideration of the placement of the trails so that it still facilitates the environmental need for that too. So
Others? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
One comment, and it's to echo Councilmember Kern's desire to have some sort of accessibility call out in the goals. I think it could maybe fit really nicely in number 3, but I'll leave it to you all to workshop that.
I wanted to ask you what you generally understood to be equitable accessibility. That's a term that comes up over and over and over again. And I don't know that there's a shared understanding for that.
Yeah, that's
And
really
equitable these days is a very much actively being negotiated in our society. So I think that needs to be in there, but I want to make sure I kind of understand, or we understand that.
So there was a lot of discussion about this at the OSAP meeting, which was really great. And one of the takeaways was there is a significant difference between the definition of equal access and equity. So someone might perceive being able to equally access that trailhead because there's a curb cut there. Right. And so the perception is that everybody has access to it. Right? But the equitable issue is that, well, there are people who are with different disabilities, different capabilities, and they need additional features to help make that experience and access equitable to everyone else. And so it's a really interesting conversation, and you can get into it pretty deeply to explain it. And I think we do need to, in the glossary of terms, need to explain the differences, but we'd like to use the word equitable access because it's really starting to define that we're aware of the context around the site, the situation, and we're responding to all people, all needs.
When I personally think of that term, I think of removing barriers, removing hurdles, which is a different thing than just saying, well, nobody's being barred from a trail. You know, everybody can somehow have minimal access is not equitable necessarily. I'd also expanded. I think there's a social aspect to equity. There's sort of a mental health or mental accessibility for people who, for example, are on the autism spectrum. That's important. Maybe not on trails as much, perhaps, but definitely on parks. And I mean, we use these terms consistently. I don't know whether they have different meanings depending on which part of the report or which section of goals we're talking about. But certainly in parks, that's definitely, it's just a question of, it also is a question on programming, certainly, when you're talking about maintaining, enhancing equitable programming, it's huge. Who exactly is your audience? Who isn't your audience because you never reach them? Who do you want to be your audience? Those kinds of things. I think I'm not being comprehensive. I just think that will be a term that will be really important and a great advantage to the community, both the staff and the community in all of this. One thing before we start taking public comment, I want to make sure we take a break because it's about 8 o'clock. And I want to kind of check in with council about where we're at on the things that we're doing, whether we can get through everything. But also, there was conversation earlier about who the audience is for this. And I want to underscore, I think Councilmember Kern made the point, but it's great for this to be a document that can be used very much by staff, no question. But it's a document which council is going to need in driving budget decisions and so forth. And to the extent things change, there may be good reasons to change the plan. But this community is not content with reports like this being, just on staff members' shelves. They want to know, they want to have input, they want to be able, particularly on the strategies. I think as we go further, that will probably tell the tale. I think you can count on that. Yes, Councilmember Hefner.
I just have one final substantive comment, which is it may make sense to consider collapsing that final goal in each category into a catch-all section somewhere because it looks to be pretty much identical content. And just for the sake of brevity, not repeating it across each category.
Yeah, that's a great observation, and I'll add one more to it. We have a tendency to, under each division, to use language like monitor this, track this, fund this, partnerships this, and I think all of those things are equally applied to every division. You're going to monitor, you're going to track, you're going to raise money, you're going to develop partnerships. To your point, rather than keep repeating these things, you might want to sit somewhere else in the implementation chapter and really stress it because it applies to everything.
Council, take a break here, but we think we can get through the rest of this tonight comfortably? Okay, we'll do that. After we get back, we'll take public comment on this first item. So why don't let's come back in about, say, we never make it back in 5 minutes. So we just don't. So let's say get here on the early side of 8:10. How about that? Thanks. back. We are now going to take public comment on some of the things that we've said in the report. As we've discussed it, you have, if you'd like to speak, just fill out a card, hand it to the to clerk, and she'll call your name. When she calls your name, go to the podium and state your name, and whether you live in Louisville, you've got 3 minutes to say your piece. You don't have to use 3 minutes. You can, if you pool your time, you can speak for up to 6 minutes. Again, you don't have to speak for that length of time. All of the comments that we've gotten, and we've gotten some really extensive and helpful comments by email, are going to be weighted just as the comments that we hear from the podium are. So we're looking forward to some great public comment. So why don't we get going?
First up is Susan McEachern, followed by Tamara Krantz.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susan McEachern, a Louisville resident, and I'm chair of the Open Space Advisory Board, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Open Space Advisory Board here. We did submit a memo, and so I apologize if it's a little repetitive, but I wanted to emphasize a couple of points especially. First of all, there was a mention by a couple of council members about the need to include charter language or reference to the charter in the goals and the guiding principles as well. So we suggest that in the end, that we include adhering to the city charter's open space management standards. You know, obviously staff and city council is very familiar with the charter language, but, you know, given that this is a document that the public is going to be referencing as well, I think it's important to include some detail about that so everyone understands what the charter language says. We would also, in number 4, or I'm sorry, now we're going down from guiding principles to draft open space goals. There we go. Thank you. So we would suggest changing the wording on the first item to prioritize open space natural resource management to support established ecological principles, stewardship, resource protection, fire mitigation, and sustainable practices. And Councilmember Kern, this is where we would suggest getting in your concern about fire mitigation language being included. We felt that this was the best place to incorporate that. And then this also came up in the council discussion number 4. We felt like these 2 points, as Keith mentioned from our earlier discussion in OSAP, that these were 2 kind of diverging elements. So we wanted to have goal number 4 to focus only on access and not on natural resources per se. So that, and we also had a lot of discussion about the issue of using the word equity. You know, equity does mean so many different things to so many different people. So we really proposed leaving that out entirely. It could certainly be something that is discussed in the appendix, but making it a more general statement so that there isn't the confusion about what equity means. And the fact we had public members talk about, well, you know, if you want access, if you want wheelchair access, that you would pave all the trails, but then what would you do for people who have joint issues and need a soft surface trail to enjoy, you know, to be able to use a trail? So it's a very complicated situation. We certainly recognize that. But we would also like then to create a new number 6 that talks about strategic acquisitions. So that language would be pursue strategic acquisitions that maintain and enhance wildlife habitat and corridors. And again, that goes to your point about making sure that wildlife can move adequately and provide passive recreation for a growing population while supporting healthy ecosystems. And again, this goes down into strategies. So draft open space strategies. I guess we're not looking at that right now, but we would move strategy 4.1 to the new goal 0.6, which is what I described above. And we would also like to add a strategy that would enhance and protect open space water resources. Water is going to become such a growing critical area for us that we felt that addressing water resources was really important to include in the plan. And then Keith had also mentioned this in the draft trail system goals, that we change thoughtful to research-based, so that we're really
Susan,
focusing.
I apologize. Your
Okay.
time's up.
All righty. And then approve a council-approved policy for managing undesignated trails, which also came up earlier. Thank you very much.
One thing I'll insert here, thanks, is that since we're focusing tonight on goals and the overall, what do we call them, kind of the overall vision statements, the guiding principles, there will be more time to talk about the strategies. You're welcome to touch on that if you like, but since we're not addressing it on council right now, that may have been a little bit of confusion. You're welcome to do it. I don't want to discourage anybody from doing that, but know that there'll be another chance to have public comment on those issues.
Next up is Tamara Krantz, followed by Catherine Smith.
Hi, thank you. My name is Tamar Krantz, and I just asked Tyler, who goes to Monarch, where my kids go, if I could use some of his time, because I wanted to pass on, not on his behalf, but on behalf of my kids, a comment about youth. Is that okay if I have extra time?
He's willing, then that's fine.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Do you want to say anything about the youth? Or I was going to speak, I'll go first if that's okay. And then you please chime in. I just wanted to say really quickly that my kids use the skate park. The skate park didn't come up directly, but my kids go to Monarch as well. And I think that keeping kids interacting in person, having a place to go is like super important these days. And I just noticed that there's new obstacles at the dog park. My grand dog loves it, but I think the kids would love to see some new obstacles and some updates at the skate park as well. And then just finally, regarding the rec center, I know that it's difficult not for all kids, but they just don't always have money with them. And I always kept a punch pass for my kids to let their friends go in so they don't sneak in, because sneaking is bad. We want to teach them not to do that. So they always use the punch pass. But it would be great if there was just a free pass once in a while for kids to use to get into the rec center, keep them off the streets, especially in the wintertime. And if you please go ahead.
All I really would say is, I think the trails, the whole trail network and the sidewalks and bike paths are really important, because just like for, whether it's just trails like walking, or if people are like commuting on bike paths with electric bikes, or, bikes, or just even walking, I think that's just important. Also just to keep maintained too.
Can you state your name and
sorry.
whether you're in Louisville?
I'm Tyler Levins, and I live in Louisville.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah. Are you finished?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your time. Yeah, so I guess, is that okay if combined we have 6 minutes?
I'll make an executive decision and say you're fine.
Okay, thank you very much. I know, yeah, thanks. I really appreciate you sharing your time with me, Tyler. And since I have a little bit of extra time, I just wanted to take the time to say thank you to Mayor Lay for taking the time out of your Saturday after going to an open house to come to the CAC open house on small town character. It was really appreciated to see you there. And I also wanted to say thank you to Director Blackmore for taking care of a goose issue immediately. It's just, you guys are great. I really appreciate that. But I also finally, just to follow up on what Susan McEachern was saying regarding the strategies, I think, I don't want to misstate what you were saying, but I felt like she was actually talking about a goal, something that's in the strategies, which is acquisition, that needs to be elevated to the level of a goal. Am I saying that right? So it wasn't really on the strategy. I felt like that was relevant to this conversation. Regarding the plan, I was listening to the conversation of the guiding principles, and I really liked the circular way that it was done in the comprehensive plan because first of all, it's good to have consistency through our plans, and mainly because I feel like the guiding principles miss something really important on open space. I think that there needs to be another level for adding the charter language into the guiding principles. Open space doesn't seem to fit neatly into those guiding principles. So for that reason, I like the circular one more because it gives you room to add something else on the using the open space, some of the open space charter language. I really encourage you to support what was in that OSAB memo to incorporate that into the next series of changes that you make. Specifically, I'd like to see adding a goal on acquiring priority parcels and creating habitat connections to be one of the goals. And for trails, I agree, and I heard it said, and I saw the survey, connections are really important, but I also really think that you need to treat the trails, and I think Councilmember Kern mentioned this, the trails that are going through open space very differently from the trails that are used for commuting. And I did take the time to read the really wonderfully put together and summarized summary of all this of the statistical survey that was done. And you can kind of see that the connections are really important. There really is a big emphasis on how people use open space. When you get down to the question of what do you use the trails for? I mean, people use it for spiritual reasons, for meditating, for connection with nature. It's a lot more than just for commuting. So I really hope that you can separate the different trails. And I saw somebody had written a letter in to say, consider using pedestrian only for some open space trails. I'd love that. As undesignated trails are also getting really out of hand around the Warrenburg Pond area. I really would hope to see some of those undesignated trails closed. And I just wanted to remind you that Keith had said something about balancing the recreational aspect with the preserve aspect for open space. But I just wanted to remind you that the charter language specifically says passive recreation. So when we're defining recreation, I hope you can add the word passive recreation. And finally, just regarding the trails, for if you're changing trails, building new trails, I just wanted to ask that you, just for preserving riparian areas, make sure that no trails just don't go, put it in the, I think you could put it in the goals, or maybe this is down at strategy level, but make sure that trails don't go on both sides of a creek and that they keep a 120-foot buffer, and make sure that we don't circle ponds all the way around. I know we have an island at Warrenburg Pond and the trail that goes all the way around, but it would be much better, and we'd probably attract nesting birds if we were able to close and create a buffer on one side. And yeah, that's a lot of things, but I really appreciate you taking my comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up is Catherine Smith, followed by Susan Liu.
Hi, I'm Catherine Smith. I'm a Louisville resident, and I'm here tonight to talk to you about golfing. I'm kidding. I'm here to talk to you about open space. I support all of the comments that you heard from Susan, and I support Tamar's comments. I guess I heard tonight that people feel like there's a case to be made that the city charter belongs every place in the plan. But given that it's supposed to be a reference for staff, council, boards, and commissions, I'm arguing for a prominent place. And I'm arguing for the full language of the city charter, because anytime you start paraphrasing, you say something similar, but not exactly the same. I just wanted to speak to one comment you made, Keith, and I don't think you meant to be divisive, and I might have misheard. But I wanted to say that I consider myself both a person who wants to protect the land, and I am also a user of the land. And I feel like sometimes we split the community into the people who are the users, who are on the trails, and the people who just want to protect. And I just want to say I'm both. And I think in many ways I'm representative of a meaningful segment of the community. I am in the whole discussion about equity and inclusion and getting more people on the trails. I am the person with the creaky old joints. And so I'm here to say soft surface trails are a good thing, but I'm not expecting them on 100% of the trails. And a principle that I would like to see reflected in our trail placement is ecology first. And there are national standards that reflect that principle. It's not a radical, crazy idea that I came up with. The US Forest Service says when we decide where we're going to put trails, we look to see what the impacts will be on the wildlife, on the habitat, on the ecosystem. And I would like to see us follow a nationally recognized standard. I don't think that's a cuckoo idea. I want to echo what Tamar said about the importance of the water habitats, riparian areas and wetlands. I have paid attention, particularly the last couple of springs, and noticed that Coal Creek is 100% dry in spring runoff. And given that 92% of wildlife depends on riparian areas, at some point in their life cycle, that has huge impacts for our wildlife. The concept that there shouldn't, okay, that's fine. It would be a courtesy to people who are speaking who can't keep track of the time if you could at least give us a warning so that we have some idea and can prioritize our comments.
I apologize, the timer isn't working this evening for some reason.
Oh, well, if we'd known that, I think that I could have brought my phone up. So communication is key. Thanks all.
Next up is Susan Wu. Susan, you're muted on your end.
Okay. All right, there. Hi, Susan Liu, Ward 2 resident, 35 years. I want to talk at a high level. And I think, you know, what you on council need to understand is, okay, what's going to be the headline when the press gets a hold of this? And I'll tell you what I would like to see the headline be. You know, in the moniker North, when you talk about nurturing existing assets, and then there was some discussion about, well, you need to add new opportunities in there. I think the way it was written is fine. And going back to what I think Councilors Hoffner and Dickinson were alluding to, nurturing existing assets can sometimes be contrary to adding new assets, okay? So that's a totally different subject. And I think the community has told you time and time again that we really care about you taking care of what's existing. There's also not enough emphasis on living within a budget and some fiscal responsibility. And there needs to be clearly stated that future projects and additions need new funding sources. The other thing I don't see a lot of is enforcing the current rules and regulations. I could go on and on about all what I'm talking about, but I'll just use one blatant example, and that's the dogs in Harper Lake all the time. And finally, I agree with what I thought I heard Councilor Kern and the mayor saying, that there's not enough emphasis on prepping for disaster, especially wildfire. And I'll conclude by saying, the average resident who pays the bills for all of this is too busy living their life to show up at these council meetings, which go on forever, to put up a defense against all these well-organized interest groups that you guys say represent the community. They don't. The average person hasn't got a clue what you're doing till you present them with, oh, well, we can't pay for it all and we need more money. So try to remember that when you're coming up with these grandiose plans. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Do we have?
That's it.
Okay, great. Council, any other thoughts that you'd like to add? Comments or responses to other
Yeah,
discussion?
thanks.
items?
I actually really do appreciate the comment about fiscal responsibility. We've been talking about that a lot with a lot of different things. We brought up the golf course and let's, throw an aspirational new clubhouse there. And I think, adding new trails, and we know how expensive it is to try to add trails. It is important that as we move forward, especially since this is a staff reference budget, is to consider budget maybe first and the goals of what you can achieve within that budget versus here's what we want. You go find the money. Maybe it's here's the money for the year, but figure the priorities and then bring them and talk about that. So I think that's a really smart thing. I think the idea of adding more taxes and making the cost of living even more expensive in Louisville is just very distasteful. So I think we need to figure out how we do this within our means. Thanks.
Other comments? Yes, Councilmember Hibbner.
Yeah, I'll just agree with what was just said. And, I think my hope for this plan is it does more than just identify the difficult decisions facing the city, and that it helps us chart a path toward making the hard decisions and some guidance on which things to choose versus not choose. It's a good first step to identify that the hard decisions are out there. But for it to be a plan in the way I understand that word, it needs to offer some guidance about how to make those decisions.
Any other comments? I would just add to that maybe one nuance, which is it would be nice to have something in the plan that talks about conflict, that recognizes that we do have in this community, we have folks who have multiple priorities. I appreciated Ms. Smith's comments about that not every person represents one kind of interest, but we do have folks who emphasize one area over another, and it can get challenging. I think a recognition that that's going to happen is a good thing. I think that's going to feed into the financial decisions and decision making. I think it's important to recognize not only that we have to live within our means, but we have to balance community sentiment and concerns. And equity concerns are ones that are not going to be representative necessarily of people. That's exactly why we have to pay attention to them. So, that's not a big issue, but in practical terms, it really is. We all got to get along, show each other a little bit of grace in all of this going forward, because there's a lot of competing interests. And I think to the point about financing or the finances generally, some kind of indication that, just because you want to add something doesn't mean you don't have to justify it. And the fact that you do want to add something ought to be, there's a bar for that. And it may be you have to look for things that you don't want as much, or you propose that you get some resources somewhere else, and there's not going to be as much thrill about raising taxes and so forth for that. So I agree with comments that have been made previously, but I wanted to add that. Anything else? Okay. All right, thank you for the comments that we have. We'll look forward to the next phase of this. I think that the next phase of this will be really interesting, talking about strategies, because I think that's where the rubber is going to meet the road. And, you know, some of what I just said about giving each other a little grace and potential conflicting priorities and financing challenges are all built into that. So thank you. We'll take into account the comments that have been made and put those in if we can. The next item B, is discussion direction on the board and commission handbook updates. And do we have a staff report on this? I think we do.
Thank you, council members. Yes, we do. I'm Sama Fox, Deputy City Manager. And as the mayor said, we are here to talk about the board and commission handbook update. So one of the things we've heard from our boards and commissions and our staff is just that importance of having clarity and consistency in all of our items. So tonight we are looking to do some centralizing of the resources and really scope this project with council members. This is the fun night. You get to decide what we're going to look at. The hard nights will come when we bring you all of those things that might have conflicts and we have to make decisions, but we'll work through all of that. So a little bit of background, we do talk about boards and commission related items pretty regularly. Back in 2023, we had a larger conversation about this. Council had a meeting on this. In 2024, we updated the existing board and commission handbook. And something I want to keep just for awareness on the radar, we're currently sitting at about 100 hours per week of staff time on boards and commissions. So I think that's an important context here for why we do need to have these conversations. It's clear as kind, right? We want to help everyone so that these are efficient and effective and having value adds for us. This is up about 7 hours a week from when we did this in 2023, not 2013. Don't have those numbers in front of us. A little bit about who this applies to. So this applies to most of our boards and commissions. We are looking at your advisory and your quasi-judicial boards. We are leaving the LRC out of this because they have a separate working agreement with you all. They're a different type of body. We are not talking about council committees. So just those 13 advisory and quasi-judicial boards. An idea of why we may need to do this. This is the current schedule. Just so you can see some of the consistency or inconsistency. We have overlapping meetings, we have different times of day. And I put a little bit of asterisk on, I believe this is the current schedule because some of these boards change pretty regularly. So the schedule can be a moving target for these. Some of these boards meet monthly, some every other month, some as needed, some seasonally. So there's just a lot of different pieces going on here. We're going to talk about 4 areas where we really need direction tonight. That's supporting document consistency, board and commission role confirmation, which would be a follow-up conversation, additional items for council consideration, which is kind of a fun list of things we're going to ask you whether you'd like us to consider or not. And then if you have any thoughts on engagement for this process, we'd like to get those now. So I'll start with this. We have multiple documents that our boards and commissions look to. We have a handbook, we have rules of procedure, and we have bylaws. We really do try to keep these all consistent with each other, but having multiple documents just creates the opportunity for inconsistency and lack of clarity. It's easy for them to conflict at different times. So the baseline of this is we would like to roll all of those into one document. That's pretty common among our peers, and we'd like to create consistency there. This may require code updates or resolution updates, especially for bylaws. We are not proposing doing anything related to the charter requirements other than working with what's existing there, as any adjustments to charter requirements would require a vote. One thing that I do not have clear in the documentation, but I'm going to ask for some forgiveness because I'm too close to this, is there are 3 inconsistencies in particular in these supporting documents that I'd like to get some insight from council on if you're open to having a conversation about them. And those specifically are number of members. This can range from 5 to 8 for our boards and commissions, term lengths, which is also inconsistent, and alternates. And so I think I'd like to just pause and see if you have any questions or if you need me to repeat those. And if you support this rolling together and looking at those three things through this process.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do any of our boards have term limits? And if so, how many and how long?
Term limits is actually one of the other areas that we're going to ask if you want to look at that. I am not aware of any term limits at this point in time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we do have different term lengths. Some boards and commissions, it's 3 years, some it's 4 years, some vary a little bit more widely.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Is it fair to conclude that people are comfortable with having a single document that governs the boards generally? Yes. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, I think in practice, consistency is better. I'm concerned that I think probably a lot of these things exist for a reason, maybe not a good reason, but you know, that if you try to make everything the same, like, for instance, I think at some point, like the cultural board was bigger because there's a lot of volunteer needs, right? So it's like, oh, a lot of board members and some other like board of adjustments, like 5 will do just fine. This isn't like a big discussion. We just need some experts in the room. And so I think if it's like, oh, every board has 7, do you lose some flexibility there? Like, well, we can't find 7 for this board, or
Sure.
7's not enough to do the work of this board. So I like the idea of consistency, but I'm concerned. And then sort of same thing with like term, it's like, well, could we get you to do it for a year? So like, I think the reason they have 1 year, 3 year, 5 year different term lengths, I'm sure that came up for some reason over time. So again, I'm concerned to say, hey, just blanket, like when you start, it's 3 years. And the only exception is when you're like filling someone's term, right? So maybe like you're taking over someone's 3-year term, so you only have a year left, and that's fine. Because again, it's just 3-year terms, that's it. And then we struggle to find people that are willing to commit to 3 years on a board they've never been on. And then we have vacancies, right? And so, okay, well, would you do it for a year? And so I'm just curious how much of that came about because it was needed. And so what are we going to lose? I don't feel strongly about it. I think it's more just cautionary that like, it's a great idea in principle, and then we might struggle to execute if we're too rigid. And so maybe there's a goal and then an opportunity for flexibility. I think maybe same thing with alternates. It's like, does every board actually need an alternate or not? And is there? I think being clear about what that policy is maybe the point, like clarity of
Yes.
the why. This board is special. It only has 5 members, and this is why. Because every board has 7 members. So this one's being called out for only having 5 or 3 or 9 because of specific, just doesn't happen to have that. It's breaking a rule. And so it's nice to have rules because then you know what you're doing when you're breaking the rules. I think that's most of the thoughts I have on that. I think it's a good effort. And as far as one document, I think that makes a lot of sense. Same issues probably like,
Yep.
I think of HPC and the need for experts, and other boards don't need experts and that kind of thing. So because you still have to have some individual stuff in it. I'm sure you've thought about that.
I agree. Yeah. In the document, we'd need to have individual clarity on roles. And then some of them might have some unique membership requirements, right? Because some of them do need that. I also hear that there might be some reasons for these inconsistencies. So one of the things we can do is bring back a recommendation around these and highlight the why if we're recommending differences for some of these things.
Other comments? Yes, Councilmember Kern.
I agree.
Okay. So the next piece we're looking at is council interested in a conversation to confirm board and commission roles? I think role clarity is something we've heard as an ask from everyone. We hear it sometimes in your joint meetings or in your workshops. This could look like a follow-up session where we really dive into what the roles of each board and commission are. And council says, is this accurate or do we need to adjust this for right now?
Yes, Councilmember Hefner.
Yeah, I have 2 comments and they're maybe go in different directions. One is I recall doing an exercise sort of like this in the not so distant past. And it seems like maybe that iteration has not resulted in the clarity we hoped for. And so if we're going to do it again, let's make sure we apply any lessons learned from the last go around. And the second piece is, I mean, I think as we approach the role of the various boards and commissions, it's important to me that we're not just sort of inventing a role, that there's actual needed work for them to be doing that benefits staff, that benefits council, that benefits the city in some other way. And if we're essentially just coming up with justifications to have a board, and I'm not saying that's true, but I think we should take a hard look at, do we need quite so many boards as we have, especially given the staff time commitment you just discussed, or maybe, to your schedule thing, should some of them meet less frequently? Is it really, we just want their buy-in on budget and work plan? What is it they're doing that adds value to the city or to our job or to staff's job? If we can't come up with anything, that's probably a bad sign.
Councilmember Kern.
Yeah, I think those are really valid points. You're right. We did talk about this not too distant past, and right, it feels like nothing really changed. I would definitely agree that there are some of these boards that probably do not need to meet monthly, that some of these things can get consolidated to whether it's in every other month type of thing. And like, I was kind of thinking around PPLAB and really more accurately working with the staff to provide the information. And so it may be more work for staff to be trying to meet every single month instead of saying, oh, okay, we've got this together and we can, think about what it is we want to work on, what information we're looking from them to gather. Because I always think of the advisory boards to council as being, that's the boots on the ground, the eyes and ears that, like, the seven of us may not have an opportunity to always gather, instead of saying, I want 7 individual residents' opinions. They can probably just come to a meeting if we wanted to just get those 7 people to give us their opinion on a topic. I think the point is they're having discussions and looking into things and talking to the community and more closely having conversations with staff that works on projects. And I feel that somehow that isn't present anymore. We're missing that there's the outreach piece somehow. So I mean, now recently with some of the golf stuff in RAB, that was not true. There was a lot of public engagement. But that was good because it helped to kind of inform some of their secondary, go around decisions and advice that they gave to us. And we saw how valuable that was. So I think that's important. And I noticed in Superior's guidelines, one of the things that they particularly comment on and call out is that advisory board members are to be representing like the community as a whole in views versus a specialized group and interest. So if somebody is part of like an activist or group of some sort, that may be part of what we have to take into consideration in the appointment. And even if they get appointed, we didn't appoint you to bring that group's view to the advisory board. It's instead, we still want you to do more outreach. I think that that's part of it. And I just one other piece, and I think it's on the list, but it's maybe also I think we tried very hard to do this with open space this last time, is diversity in thought and diversity in perspective from the board members, right? So that it actually better represents our community. That is not the case where we have like expert level knowledge needed, like BCBOA or something. But I think making sure that, again, I think Sulu, when she was commenting, was like, hey, you've got these people with these very specialized interests who they can put it on their calendar, make a time to show up all the time. But 98% of the residents, like, they're going about their day, and maybe that person could once a month or once every other month join a group and give us their opinions of what they're hearing in the neighborhood, in the community, but they can't show up at every meeting. So let's see if there's a way for us to tap into that a little bit better.
Councilmember Cooperman.
I'd be happy to have this conversation. I was going to make two suggestions. One would be to have staff give us some indication, like what would be useful for them to get out of the board, if they think the board is useful. And then the other one would be, well, maybe we should ask the board, what does the board think its role or should be? I think that would be useful input before we had the conversation amongst ourselves.
I have maybe, I guess, a different perspective on the role clarity and expectation setting. I think expectation setting, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what that means in this context.
Would you like me to respond to that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I think expectation setting is a great question. For me, it's a little bit of what I've heard tonight. Like, do you expect boards and commissions to represent the whole community? Do you expect them to go out and be talking to people?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
And I'm very clear, we represent the community. That is our job. It's our job to get the larger community's understanding of what policy priorities are. So it's our job to reach out as well. I absolutely do not look at boards and commissions as being representative, I think that would be frankly completely contrary to being advisory. I think that one of the problems we've run into is that you've got people on boards that say they do represent a whole bunch of people. And then it's like, okay, and there's tension. I think we have boards and commissions. This is just my view, but we have boards and commissions to advise us within the context of the goals that we have set in work plan and other kinds of documents that we have. Doesn't mean they can't bring new ideas and suggestions and that kind of thing. I think we anticipate they're going to do that too, but I definitely do not want to try to make a board or commission a mini council on that particular issue. I think that's part of the problem that we're trying to solve. I think that's kind of a first question is not what problem we're trying to solve by having boards committee, but what challenge are we seeking to have more information and why? I think also that it's good to have folks who are subject matter experts. I think that's been lovely to have. It's free consulting, to be honest. So yes, Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I think, the process in which they are put on a board kind of, enforces that or reinforces that they apply, they're interviewed, and they're placed. They are not picked by their neighbors as someone who represents them, right? They're placed because of their knowledge or expertise or their individual viewpoint. So I support everything you just said.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I have clarity about what our intention and goal is tonight with this discussion. I think what I'm hearing is that we do need to discuss this further, and our intention is not to solve this tonight. So I'm on board with, clearly amongst council, there's some differing opinions. It would be helpful to staff and the board. So I would be on board with the third bullet point there that says, let's talk about this.
Thank you. I feel like that is what I'm hearing. Sorry, Councilmember.
I will agree with Mayor Pro Tem.
Perfect.
It is good, I think, to kind of raise some of these issues so that you have some direction when we do come to that. I know that there have been issues around work plan and setting agendas and maybe the lengths of meetings. I know that that's been a huge issue in some boards and commissions. Recently, there have been meetings that have gone, how late? Yeah, that's not consistent with what anybody wants. And I really appreciate the attention to trying to get some uniformity in some of this without being, as you've heard tonight, too rigid. Because there's something, some of these boards have specific ordinance requirements. Some of them are in the charter. And I would hate to see, personally, I'd hate to see term limits on things like planning commission where, maybe 30 years on planning commission is enough. But, there's a lot of nuance there, and it would be good to talk about these things. Does that make sense to people? I mean, it sounds like we have more discussion, but I do hear we're comfortable with trying to move toward the kind of handbook, some kind of handbook that we can use that has maybe the least common denominator of the issues that we can agree about. Yes, Councilmember Kern.
I'd actually also really be interested to understand more on the staff perspective of like how this helps them, or if it isn't, if it's just, like another task that has to be done. If they're doing it because it is something that helps us. So I'd like to know how engaged the staff feels like they want to be, need to be, and the community to be, and kind of their perspective on the usefulness of the type of people or the interest levels that we have on those different boards.
Okay.
And it might be different for each one, right? It might be that there's something very specific that we need for sustainability, but maybe not for parks or something. So yeah.
I think I can summarize where we are on this topic, if that works. So I heard that we are interested in follow-up conversation. We'd like to get that insight from staff and from the board members. And I heard that we want to frame some follow-up around our expectations for the boards. Some of the things that we've talked about internally, just to give you an idea of what this could look like, is we could bring to you some expectations that we are looking for every board to spend their this month meeting focusing on budget and give you a recommendation by this time. So we could set some of those things that we could then give to boards for guidance through that conversation. Okay.
I think that's great. Comfortable? Everybody thumbs up? Did you have something, Councilmember Fee?
I'm wondering if there's also a possibility of eliminating or combining some of the boards that we have.
Y'all are jumping ahead tonight.
Okay, I'll pause.
No worries. We can dive right into other items for consideration. So a number of these things have come up in our conversation already. But I'm just going to kind of go through them in the order. There is no particular order here. These are just how things have come up. One of the things we want to talk about is clarifying communications with council. So does council need to be communicated to via memo? Is this in the form of joint meetings? What does this look like? I think it happens in a variety of ways right now. Are we supportive of adding clarity to that in the handbook?
I mean, I'll just say what you have on here, I think is really important as a whole. I'll do the by exception rule. The subcommittee and friends of organizations I'm extra sensitive to, because I want to make sure, like, if there's a subcommittee, it is a subcommittee of the committee members, and that friends of organizations do not get special treatment, and that their voice is somehow like being elevated by the committee. They are members of the community and their voice is such. So that one I want to see where you land on it. The other ones, I feel like I appreciate the other ones as a council member having those. So I would imagine someone on a board and commission would like them as well. And I leave it to you all to decide based on your experience in other communities and reviewing their information, like what's the best way to go about those.
Second.
Yeah, third.
Fourth.
Can I just pick on a couple that I really want to make sure we have policy confirmation before I explore?
Before we do that, can I just
Yep.
put one little additional piece on subcommittees? I'm nervous about subcommittees just generally because I'm thinking that that's going to be additional work for staff. and subcommittees can morph into something that we have going right now in one, which I think is, it's going to have the potential to sort of conflict with something that the committee as a whole would be. One of the things that I think has been a strength of the way we've done the standing committees for council is that we make recommendations. And I think that's, we don't, finance and EDC both don't make decisions. They make recommendations to the bigger group. So if there's going to be some kind of thing, I hope that you can cabin that. The other thing is it may just be a matter of, they're doing, some kind of like quick hit task force of a couple of people doing things. I'm concerned that those things end up creating even more challenges for staff, for council, by splitting up the group, because it is an advisory board or commission, like one. So I think that I would echo the part of that. And I think these other ones are really pretty good. Yeah. Councilmember Kern and then Councilmember Hefner.
No, go ahead.
Thanks. So you kind of brought up something that made me think about this. Well, first of all, I think if we're going to do a separate meeting, these are really good for us to maybe like hammer out so that you have more specificity. I think that makes sense. And like for the for a handbook type of thing, but you're saying like the expectation that the boards are making recommendations. And I feel like anymore, a lot of our boards come to us, they make a recommendation, and I think the most helpful thing every year is always their recommendation on projects, especially the capital improvement things. That's really, really useful to find out where those priorities are, right? But I feel like on all the other stuff, they make recommendations. And if we don't take that recommendation and implement it, it's like we're looked at like, well, why do you even have us? Because you're still helping. I mean, you're still very useful. Even if it's only 1 out of 10 ideas, it was so great that you still took the time and you engaged and got together and gave us that advice. That's the kind of expectation I would love to be able to maybe clarify with our boards and commissions. And this includes planning. Right? Planning Commission is still, it's quasi judicial, but they're supposed to be advisory. They have information or knowledge, maybe backgrounds that some of us do or don't have. But I don't think it means that we just take what they say and make it so. And I think we should clarify that expectation for our boards and commissions.
Yes, Councilmember.
I agree. I want to echo the Mayor Pro Tem's earlier comment that I think this is a discussion about what we're going to discuss, right? We're trying to not get into the merits. So I think we should all, I have opinions on a lot of these. And if we go through the list and everybody shares an opinion for 5 or 10 minutes, I think it's going to be a pretty long meeting tonight. And so maybe we could focus on getting the right list and moving on.
That's fair enough. Other comments about the list? Did you, I want to come back to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think for me, before staff spends time on these, I want to make sure that council's comfortable with talking about these. And I hear that council's comfortable with talking about all of these at this point in time. I do want to just confirm term limits did come up. Is that something council is comfortable with talking about? Okay. And then I also heard time commitment came up. I know we'll talk about that and meeting length and trying to make sure that we're ending in a realistic time for everyone to participate.
Did that include, just quickly, was that also like the consistency with start times and things like that, just from a more of a community-wide engagement process? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's helpful for the community if they know when things are starting, that they're not overlapping as much, reasonable end times. That makes it more predictable for them to participate.
The only question I would raise about term limits as I think about them is that one and maybe, I don't know, maybe some role clarification is that there are at least arguably some boards and commissions that are more equal than others. And that is they have a special place, right? For whatever reason, expertise. I mean, planning commission is special. Clearly open space, special. You know, I mean, these are things that the only thing I worry about a little bit is lumping everything together, because I think term limits could be a very more complicated discussion with respect to, say, planning commission than it would be, say, with PLAB. Just something to think about as we're planning ahead. You know, I want to leave it comfortable for you to say, whoa, that seems like it's going to be a policy choice or policy decision. Maybe we're going to be able to get to it during the meeting that we have with all these other subjects. Maybe we aren't. I just want to give you the freedom to come back to us and say, you know, maybe time out.
We will definitely be coming back to you for those choices. They're your choices.
Other comments?
Is there one more thing that we can add in? It's people who might want to serve on more than one board. Like right now, where we're so short staffed in help, there might be somebody who is on open space, for example, that would really love to also help us with parks and public land. And if that was the case, I don't know if we have a policy, so maybe that should be something that we discuss.
Great topic. Thank you. Great topic. Yes, Councilmember Faith.
I'm wondering if under this meeting date and time consistency, we're going to discuss not having two boards meeting on the same night at the same time,
Certainly.
and nothing else but us on Tuesdays. Okay.
So thank you. This is a big list. Honestly, I wasn't sure you were going to say yes to all of these things. So you've just upped my project on this a little bit. But what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of research around what others are doing, and we'll come back with some recommendations. But we will certainly be seeking council guidance on
We
these.
probably should have taken public comment before.
Sure.
But we ought to take public comment before you close out this.
I have another slide, so it's up to you whenever you.
Oh, you got one more slide? Do it.
I just want to touch base on engagement expectations, because this is kind of a broad scope project. Certainly all the staff liaisons have been engaged to this point in developing these lists, and they will be engaged going forward. We'd like to engage our boards and commissions. This is a pretty broad scope right now, which makes it both important to engage them and a little bit of a lift to engage them and educate them. So at this moment, we definitely recommend a survey. I'm not exactly sure what that'll look like, but I'm going to think through kind of some phasing of this. One of the things that we had talked about is we could pull the chairs or a member of each board and commission together into sort of a working group on some of these topics. That's an option. Or we could also attend each of the boards and attend a meeting there. That's a pretty time-intensive approach. Certainly some of these things could be a big impact.
I think I would be most in favor of a survey to make sure that we encompass everyone who's on the board and their thoughts about this.
I kind of like the survey idea, but if we could include maybe some previous board members too, like most recent people who've had experience, that would also be pretty valuable, because some people have left a board or a commission not reserved, and they might have some insight that would help us all.
Other thoughts? Yes, Councilmember Kugel.
Yeah. I assume the board could decide to have a discussion if they wanted to. So I wouldn't necessarily ask you to go to every board, but I think I would leave it up to the boards to decide if they want to have their own discussion about this as well.
It makes me a little bit nervous. Just in terms of, we know that we have some boards that would probably take us up on that. And then it could be, I would just be concerned that they have more weight than the others that just decided to do the survey. And so I think if we're going to do the survey, then we do the survey for everyone. If we're going to engage with all the boards, then we engage with all the boards. But think it needs to be consistent in terms of how we approach them. So there's just not one group that's weighted more than another group.
Councilmember Kern.
I also feel that way about the survey. The survey will then weight, if you will, the value of everybody's comment who chooses to, versus we have seen this in some of these boards and commissions. Some people's voices heavily outweigh others, and I would not like to see that happen. I think everyone should get an equal voice, and the survey helps facilitate that.
Comments about that? Do you have what you need on that particular set of issues?
Yes, so now that I have the scope in mind, I'm gonna go revise a project plan to meet this scope. Our goal is to bring you information to adopt by October. Given the broad nature of the scope, depending on how our follow-up conversation goes, we may phase this. We may start with some document consistency and then take a next phase next year, just depending on the conversation going forward. But again, we'll bring a draft to council in October, and that is with the intention that you can recruit for the boards and commissions with the new information, and it goes into effect January 1 of next year to have as minimal an impact on the existing board members as possible.
Great. Any final comments from council on that? Doesn't seem so. Thank you very much. Nice work. Nice work. All right. We still didn't get public comment, did we? So before we close it out, do we have any public comment? No. All right. We're going to close it out now. Upcoming agenda items and identification of new ones, April 15th, 2026 to July 31st, 2026. I believe the city manager is going to jump in on this one.
Yes, thank you. So included in your council communication packet is the report that shows the agenda forecast for the next 3 months. Just want to note a couple of items. As we look ahead to, as you know, these things are very fluid. So we have items that move on and off the agenda. And so that is occurring April 21st. The grant license to Excel is going to move to a later date. When we look ahead to May 5th, we have the playground replacement likely going to move to a later date as we're working out the contracts. The May 19th meeting, the golf course pond liner is going to need to move because we received one bid that was $100,000 over budget. So we're looking at options to proceed forward with that. And so again, very fluid. What I really want to focus on as we look ahead is items that remain to be scheduled. We just have the work session that we'll do on the boards and commissions handbook. But we also have, I broke this down by department, so community development, home hardening code update, defensible space, Louisville economic snapshot, affordable housing fund, and short-term rentals citywide. For public works, we have, we're going to scale back. We're not going to do necessarily a facilities plan. We're going to focus more on an employee office space plan to provide to council what we anticipate in terms of needs of office space. For the police department, city attorney, prosecuting attorney, we have the model traffic code updates and animal regulations. For city attorney, we have the municipal code update we need to do related to this Colorado Supreme Court decision for penalty provisions. And then for the city manager's office, communication study session, and then cellular coverage. And so lots of items. And as you can see, based upon the agenda, we are pretty packed through at least the end of May. We do have some openings as we look into June and July, which brings me to the next topic of summer break discussion. So currently, when you approved the calendar for 2026, we had the summer break scheduled for June 22nd to July 4th. So that is highlighted here in pink. One of the things, I know that there are at least 2 council members that plan to be out on July 7th. So there's some options. We could expand the summer break from June 22nd to July 10th. So this week would then be break as well. That would mean that our council meeting would be June 16th and then July 14th. So we would have about a month in between council meetings. which is why we're having the discussion now so we can plan accordingly. Another option is to shift the summer break a week so it starts the week of June 29th and then goes through July 10th. And so we would end up having a meeting on June 23rd. You will note in July, as it's currently scheduled, you have 5 meetings between the budget workshop and then the other regular meetings and the 2 special meetings. And so if we were to expand the summer break to include July 7th, you would still have 4 meetings in July. So at this point, I'm looking for council direction as to how you would like to address summer break.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I would propose we just expand to July 2nd. What is it, the 22nd through July 10th or whatever?
Okay.
Agreed.
So does anyone have any level of concern that we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States, the 150th anniversary of the state of Colorado, and we will not have a meeting before that event or like the immediately after? It's going to be, because it's going to be a pretty big public event. Staff's going to be very actively involved. So, no.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I mean, I'm personally not. I think we can acknowledge it and participate. I don't think the meeting from the dais will change that much. And I think to your point of how much work staff is doing in relation to that, that's in my view, all the more reason to have this gap.
Maybe gives them a little bit more time to
Yeah,
focus on that.
exactly.
That's fine. Yeah.
Exactly.
Is there, I have my own selfish reasons for trying to push it back to June 30th, which have to do with my own vacation schedule, which is not going to be able to begin until July 1st, regardless. Is there any interest or indifference to options 1 and 2, or are people committed to doing option 1?
What I heard was option 2 was the,
Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
to expand it. So we would be on break from basically after the June 16th meeting, we would not have another meeting until July 14th.
Doesn't sound like it. All right, we'll do option 2.
All right, thank you.
So we're going to be off from 22nd to the 10th.
Correct.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.